Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Pauline Zyle. On February 22, 1995, Pauline Zyle heard the verdict of the court for the crime she had committed. She was lucky to avoid the death penalty. Instead, she was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Tears streamed down her face as she held the hand of her lawyer, seeking comfort despite her unfortunate outcome. She had avoided being placed in a cell with 5 other inmates on death row. Pauline Zyle was a devoted mother, working 2 jobs to support her children. From her first marriage, she had a daughter named Christina. With her second husband, John Zyle, she had 2 sons. Christina lived with her father's relatives in Maryland for a time and did not live with her mother. Many who knew Pauline considered her a good mother. Although she was abandoned by her mother and grew up in an orphanage, no one suspected that she could become a danger to society, especially to her own family. Christina lived with her grandmother, and they had a good relationship. However, just before a series of unfortunate events, her grandmother gave Christina to her mother in Florida. Because they had been separated for so long, Christina was not happy about this reunion. In June 1994, she lived in her mother's small 2-room apartment in Riviera Beach with her 2 younger brothers and John Zyle, her stepfather. John was indifferent to Christina, creating a tense family atmosphere. 4 months later, Christina's mother, Pauline, reported to the police that her daughter had been kidnapped. While in a crowded store, 7-year-old Christina went into the women's restroom and did not return. Pauline searched everywhere but could not find her. The police took her report seriously and began searching for Christina. During a television appearance, Pauline became emotional, begging for her daughter's safe return, but no one suspected that her feelings might not be sincere. As the police investigated, Pauline's family, friends, and acquaintances revealed that the couple often argued. The tension in the family was not only due to Christina's presence but also to Pauline's marriage to her second husband, John. They argued daily, and he was very controlling. He did not hesitate to resort to violence if things went wrong. Neighbors often heard their arguments, and he was also known to have abused Christina. The police speculated that Christina may have run away, feeling resentment toward her mother and stepfather, and sought comfort from her grandmother, where she had a happier childhood. They began to follow up on this line of investigation. The grandmother stated that she had not seen Christina since she returned her to her mother, although she missed her very much. Interviews with witnesses at a nearby store yielded no useful information. No one had seen a girl matching Christina's description that day, and there were no security cameras in the area. Despite a thorough search of the store, they found no trace of Christina. Then the police discovered a crucial clue: Pauline had sold her bicycle and a videotape. When asked about these items at Christina's school, her mother dismissed them, saying they were no longer needed. At the time, everyone was still hopeful that Christina was alive, but this new information was very disturbing. The police began to question whether Christina had actually been in the store that day and considered the possibility that Pauline's story was a lie intended to mislead the investigation. 2 weeks after Christina's disappearance, the police obtained a search warrant and thoroughly searched the home where Christina lived with her mother. Unfortunately, these searches did not yield any useful information. They could not find any clues at the time. Pauline, the girl's mother and the last person to see her alive, became the prime suspect. However, the situation changed dramatically a few days later when Pauline went to the police in tears and confessed. She claimed that her husband, John, had beaten their daughter to death, but insisted it was an accident. Pauline provided a detailed account of Christina's final moments. A victim of domestic violence, she admitted to fabricating the kidnapping story to mislead the police. Her efforts to cover up the crime ultimately contributed to her long prison sentence. John Zyle lived with his wife, Pauline, and their sons in a cramped apartment. They struggled financially, and the difficult living conditions may have contributed to negative feelings towards their daughter, Christina. On September 16, 1994, John lost control and beat Christina because she was dirty and had problems with urinary incontinence. Neighbors heard noises, including John's screams and Christina's cries, which sounded different from the typical cries of a child. They could hear muffled thumping, followed by Christina screaming louder. Eventually, the noise died down, but the mother begged John to stop. During the incident, Christina lost consciousness and began to convulse. John hit her hard enough to silence her and covered her mouth with his hand, causing her to choke. When things finally quieted down, neighbors could hear John's panicked voice. John and Pauline hid Christina's body in a closet for a week before moving it to a vacant lot behind a shopping center to bury it. Pauline agreed to reveal Christina's burial location. On October 27, Christina's body was found. She had multiple stab wounds. Forensic experts confirmed that the cause of death was strangulation. The child had suffocated while trying to cover her face with her hands. Police discovered that while the body was in the closet, the couple had prepared for the burial by purchasing items such as shovels, tarps, cleaning supplies, and other necessary tools. Pauline had acted cautiously. She took Christina's belongings, such as her bicycle and videotapes, to a pawn shop. She later admitted that she had done so to erase the memory of her daughter. However, the reality was simpler. She had used the money from the pawn to pay for the burial and clean the house. Pauline blamed her husband for their daughter's death, claiming that he was responsible for killing her. But later revelations changed the story. John claimed that Pauline never intervened when he was beating Christina. On the day he lost control and attacked Christina, he asked Pauline to call for help to save the girl while she was still alive, but Pauline refused to help their daughter. During questioning, Pauline admitted this. She believed that the girl could still be saved, but she was too afraid of facing the consequences of her actions to take her to the hospital. The police discovered that Christina had been abused many times before. Despite this, Pauline never intervened to stop the abuse. Even when Christina begged Pauline for help during John's attack, Pauline showed no interest. Pauline Zyle and John Zyle were later arrested and charged with child abuse and concealing evidence. Pauline, who has 2 sons, faced losing her parental rights. Realizing this during the first hearing, she voluntarily relinquished her rights to her sons through their attorney. A foster family took in the children. Pauline Zyle's trial began, during which she denied her guilt and blamed John for what had happened. Her lawyer argued that Christina's death was accidental, but the prosecution countered effectively, highlighting clear evidence of violence. The defense claimed there were many mitigating circumstances, stating that Pauline was a loving mother and that her colleagues respected her. The lawyers attempted to argue that Pauline was controlled by John, an abusive husband who kept her in a constant state of fear, which prevented her from fighting back. However, the prosecution pointed out that Pauline herself admitted she could have saved her daughter but chose not to. Relatives from Christina's biological father's side, including her grandmother, who had cared for Christina for many years, claimed that from the moment Christina was born, her mother had considered her unwanted and did not want to care for her. They expressed remorse for returning Christina to her mother, Pauline. The prosecution argued that John played a key role in Christina's murder. They claimed that Pauline's actions were completely contrary to her maternal instincts, as she failed to protect her child and did not call for help. Pauline's lawyers disputed this view. However, there was no doubt that both parents were responsible for her death. After an hour and a half of deliberation, the jury returned a verdict. They agreed with the prosecution and found Pauline Zyle guilty of first-degree murder because she was with John when he harmed her and actively participated in covering up the crime, including burying the child in a vacant lot. As a result, she was sentenced to life in prison, plus an additional 13 years for concealing evidence and child abuse, rendering her ineligible for parole. When Pauline's sentence was announced, she cried tears of joy, relieved to avoid the death penalty in the electric chair. Although her lawyers planned to appeal the verdict, claiming it was unjust, their efforts were rejected. The prosecutor stated that the verdict should serve as a warning to abusive parents, emphasizing that such individuals would face serious legal consequences. The case provoked a strong emotional response from the public. As a result, the jury had to be changed to ensure their decision was fair. Many were shocked that Pauline did not intervene to save her daughter, did not call for help, and actively participated in the cover-up of the horrific crime. The public reaction led to a wave of protests. Experts noted that many children are often victims of violence at the hands of their own parents. This situation has been exacerbated by a series of similar crimes in recent years. In California, a woman killed her 3 children, the youngest being 4 years old and the others being 8 and 9. She attempted to blame her husband, who lived far away from the children. The husband fought for custody of the children but had a solid alibi, as he was hundreds of miles away when the tragic events occurred. In 1998, the woman was sentenced to death and is still awaiting execution. There have been many similar cases reported in the media, most notably the 1983 case of Elizabeth Diane Downs. Elizabeth claimed that a stranger shot her 3 children after she picked him up on a deserted road. However, it was revealed that she had shot them herself. Her 7-year-old daughter died as a result, and her 2 other children were left disabled. Elizabeth is currently serving a life sentence for first-degree murder and attempted murder, with the possibility of parole after 25 years, but she has been denied parole several times. A common theme in these cases is that mothers often try to blame their husbands for their actions. Police have become increasingly skeptical of these attempts at blame. This skepticism is evident in Pauline's statements, as police note that her case is not an isolated one. There are many cases of postpartum depression and similar issues affecting mothers. A psychiatrist points out that many tragic child deaths could have been prevented if mothers had received proper support. However, in Pauline's case, there was no indication of any mental health issues, which is why she is facing serious charges. Everyone involved in the case knew the details and believed that Pauline could have prevented her daughter's death. Not only did she fail to stop her husband, but she also missed the opportunity to seek help. When she called for assistance, she could have received guidance that might have saved Christina. However, Pauline deliberately chose not to pursue this option. It was also revealed that Pauline had worked as a nurse. She had a medical degree and was educated and trained in emergency care. Despite this, she made no attempt to help her daughter. John Zyle's trial then began. The prosecutor aimed for the harshest punishment, seeking the death penalty by electric chair. John admitted to beating Christina but denied any responsibility for her death. He claimed it was an accident and that he had no intention of killing her. He had simply misjudged his own strength. His first trial ended in a mistrial due to the jury's inability to reach a unanimous decision. His second trial took place in another city in November 1996, where he was convicted of first-degree murder, concealing evidence, and aggravated child abuse. He was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole, plus 30 years for child abuse and concealing evidence. John listened to the verdict with an impassive expression. The judge ruled that the case was not serious enough to warrant the death penalty, so he overturned that aspect of the sentence. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Misty Morse. On July 23, 2000, a former judge was walking on Merritt Island, Florida, checking on his boat at the dock. While admiring his boat, he noticed something suspicious in the water. When he bent down to investigate, he smelled a very unpleasant odor. This was not the first time he had encountered dead sea creatures, so he assumed it might be an animal carcass. He contacted a special service to remove the object from the water. However, when experts arrived, they quickly realized the situation was much more serious. It was the body of a girl. The police were called to the scene. Since the body was in the water, it was important to recover it promptly and carefully to avoid losing evidence. The longer the body remained submerged, the more evidence would be washed away. To assist in this, a dive team was deployed. They entered the water with a special bag designed to retrieve the body. This device removes water and wraps tightly around the body, ensuring that as much evidence as possible is preserved. The police observed that the victim was not in the final stages of decomposition. The unidentified girl had been in the river for several days and was found in a state of her hands and feet were tied with rope, and her entire body, especially her head, was covered with several layers of tape. It appeared that the perpetrator had tried to silence the girl, as her face was tightly wrapped, covering her mouth, eyes, nose, and ears. This suggested a deliberate attempt to prevent her from surviving the attack. Identifying the victim was difficult because there were no personal belongings or identification on the body. The police quickly began a murder investigation. It was clear that she had likely been tortured for a long time and possibly abused. To fully understand the circumstances surrounding the victim's death, a thorough analysis was required. This process began with collecting the victim's fingerprints, which were taken by a specialist who accompanied the police to the crime scene. This information was expected to aid in identifying the body. The police faced a major challenge because water can easily wash away evidence, such as DNA and fingerprints. After several days in the river, there might not be any useful evidence left for investigation. Additionally, the heat significantly accelerated the decomposition process, so the body was quickly taken to the laboratory for further examination. Forensic scientists began examining the physical evidence found at the crime scene, focusing on a rope and a black rubber band used to secure garbage bags around the victim's legs. The bags were severely damaged, and forensic experts believe they were originally used to weigh down the body and prevent it from floating. It is possible that rocks or other heavy objects were placed inside the bags to keep the victim submerged. However, the current caused the bags to tear open due to a sharp rock, spilling their contents. The body eventually floated to the surface. The police particularly focused on several pieces of duct tape that were also found at the scene. The sticky side of the tape could contain evidence, as attackers often leave fingerprints and skin particles on it, especially at the ends where the tape is torn from the roll. This evidence could potentially lead to a suspect. However, the police were unable to find enough material on the pieces of duct tape. After careful analysis, they determined that some of the black hairs that had been glued together did not belong to the victim, who had chestnut hair. This suggested that the hairs belonged to someone else. The police sent the hairs for further analysis, but unfortunately, they did not provide any useful information. With the technology available in 2000, all hope now rested on an autopsy. Unfortunately, the water had washed away most of the evidence, and the autopsy revealed that the body was too decomposed to determine the cause of death. Although no traces of male bodily fluids were found on the body, this did not rule out the possibility that the victim had been abused. After analyzing all the gathered information, the police came to a conclusion. The body showed no signs of serious injury. It is believed that the victim may have died from asphyxiation due to the tape covering her mouth and nose, or from strangulation before being dumped in the river. Although there was water in her lungs and stomach, this did not mean that she had drowned. Instead, the prolonged time in the river had naturally filled her body with water. The forensic expert identified the victim through her fingerprints. She was Misty Morse, 22 years old. Her relatives described her as cheerful, friendly, and sociable. Misty enjoyed spending time with friends and attending parties, which was normal for her age. However, she stayed away from bad influences and had no connections to the criminal world or illegal drugs. Instead, she focused on her future. When she was not with her friends, she dedicated her time to preparing for college. Misty was very serious about her studies. On July 24, 2000, police arrived at Misty's family home in Indian Harbor Beach, Florida. They were greeted by her mother, Linda Morse, who was in shock at the heartbreaking news of her daughter Misty's death. Stunned, Linda turned to her husband, the girl's biological father. She desperately wanted to know who might have harmed her daughter, but the police had no leads to share. Instead, they explained that they had come not only to inform her of the death, but also to look for any information that might help identify a potential suspect. In her state of shock, Linda found it difficult to concentrate. However, the police asked her for any information about Misty's last known whereabouts. Linda recalled that 4 days earlier, on July 20, 2000, Misty had returned home in a state of great excitement. After showering, drying her hair, and getting dressed, she was ready to go. As she walked out, she and Linda ran into each other and shared a few jokes. Suddenly, Misty's cell phone rang. She initially ignored the call, but when it rang again, she felt compelled to answer. It seemed that Misty was hiding something. She stepped out of the room to talk briefly with the caller. When she returned, she seemed more serious and said she had to go. Normally, she was very sociable, but that night, she acted secretive, which aroused some suspicion. Misty promised to come back the next day, and she did not send any messages. On July 21, Linda went to work and spent the whole day there. In the evening, Misty still did not return home. Linda didn't think much of it, as Misty often slept over at friends' houses and would be gone for days. However, it was unusual for her not to have made a phone call or sent a text message. By the next morning, Linda was very worried. Misty would normally be gone for a while, but she always let her mother know where she was and never missed her scheduled time to return. Neither her father nor her friends could reach Misty. On July 24, Linda planned to go to the police station that evening to report Misty missing. However, before she could do so, her worst fears came true when the police came to her home to inform her that Misty's body had been found in a nearby river. Linda gave the police permission to search her daughter's room. Everything seemed normal, except for one strange detail. Misty's handbag was on the table. It appeared untouched, containing all of Misty's daily necessities except for her cell phone and driver's license. It was clear that Misty had not intended to be gone for long and planned to return soon. It was also clear that the last person Misty had communicated with was someone she knew well, as they had spoken on the phone shortly before she left. After discussing the situation in detail, Linda and the police decided to check Misty's call logs. Linda's claims were verified through Misty's cell phone logs. She had received 2 calls from an unknown number. Unfortunately, the police were unable to identify the owner of the unknown number, which put them at a standstill. They decided to focus on the limited clues found on Misty's body. The most intriguing clue was a rope with a distinctive red and white pattern, along with duct tape found on Misty's body. After an investigation, it was discovered that this duct tape was part of a specialized set used in sailing. Initially mistaken for ordinary repair tape, this type of tape is actually a special device used to temporarily repair sails while at sea. It is known for its high strength and adhesion and can withstand heavy loads. This information may indicate that the police are looking for someone with sports skills, or perhaps someone who has served in the Navy or worked on ships. The police decided to re-interview Misty's family, suspecting that people who knew Misty might be involved in the case. Misty's mother, Linda, informed the police about her daughter's past relationships, leading them to focus on two young men, Teddy Underwood and Bobby Cooper. Both were ex-boyfriends whose relationships with Misty had ended shortly before the tragedy. The investigation revealed that the motive for the murders was likely jealousy. Teddy was particularly notable for his lengthy criminal record, which included multiple cases of abuse and theft, despite his young age. The police then brought Teddy in for questioning. They were surprised to find him to be a friendly, cooperative young man who provided all the necessary information. He also agreed to a DNA test. Teddy explained that he had only met Misty once on the day of her disappearance. He claimed that he did not want to pursue the relationship and that they had broken up amicably. They had met online and communicated for a while before deciding to meet in person to get to know each other better. Despite Teddy's friendly demeanor, the police remained suspicious, believing that he might be trying to deceive them and divert attention from himself. Teddy agreed to let the police search his home, but they found no evidence linking him to the crime. He had no military experience and no interest in the sea. He provided a solid alibi for the entire evening and night of the murder, and he was therefore ruled out as a suspect. The police then began investigating Bobby, the next suspect, because he owned a boat. He appeared to be knowledgeable about emergency sail repair tape and a specially woven rope. Bobby had openly expressed his romantic feelings for Misty, which raised suspicions since he had tried to pursue her before the murder. He was devastated when he learned of Misty's death. The young man cooperated with the police, allowing them to search his home and passing all required tests. He had no criminal record, no history of drug use, and no addiction problems. Overall, Bobby seemed like a nice guy. During questioning, he showed strong emotions and appeared genuinely nervous, which made the police more inclined to believe him. However, things changed when the police discovered Misty's driver's license in Bobby's house. Bobby later added to his story, claiming that he had been in contact with Misty for a long time. He said that she had visited him several times and had left her license during one of her visits. Despite this, he remained a suspect. Surprisingly, at the end of the interview, Bobby recalled Misty's ex-boyfriend. Before the murder, Misty had mentioned a man who surprised Bobby because she described this man as a Special Forces soldier from the Navy. Bobby did not remember his name, but this detail piqued the police's interest, prompting them to investigate further. Linda recalled that one of her daughter's ex-boyfriends was a man named Brent Huck, a former military man. Brent and Misty had been together for a long time. Linda did not approve of their relationship, as she found Brent to be too rude. Her daughter often complained about him, saying that he was aggressive and sometimes violent in his attempts to assert control. Eventually, they broke up. Linda did not initially mention Brent because it had been over a year since they broke up. She believed that they had not seen each other or communicated since then, but she was wrong. The police ran Brent Huck through the database and found some disturbing details. First, his background as a ship captain at the time of Misty's murder raised suspicion. He lived on the island near where Misty's body was discovered. He apparently had access to special marine equipment and the skills needed to operate it, making him a potential suspect. Brent was subsequently arrested and taken in for questioning. During the interrogation, he seemed willing to cooperate, but he was clearly nervous and stressed. He was also very wary of the police. Additionally, Brent showed an unusual lack of emotion when informed of Misty's death. He seemed completely unaffected by her passing. The police discovered that the couple continued to see each other as friends, even though those around them thought they had broken up. In fact, they had been seeing each other regularly, up until the day Misty died. During the police interview, Brent's behavior was unusual compared to previous suspects. As the interview progressed, he became increasingly critical of his ex-girlfriend Misty, describing her as immoral and speaking ill of her character. Near the end of the interview, Brent revealed that he had called Misty several times on the night of her disappearance and admitted that they were still in a relationship. The police continued to work with Brent, trying to gather useful information. He seemed to know a lot about Misty's social life, including who she spent time with and what she did with other people. The police were particularly interested in the timing of his phone calls on the night of the murder. Brent claimed that a friend had told him that Misty had spread rumors about being pregnant and that he was the father. He called her to ask her to stop spreading the rumors, expressing concern that it might jeopardize his current relationship. Brent claimed that he did not see Misty in person that night. He only spoke to her on the phone. During the first long call, they talked about many topics, while in the second short call, he confirmed that everything was clear and that Misty understood him. The police doubted his testimony because the autopsy showed no evidence of pregnancy. However, they acknowledged their ongoing intimate relationship, which created a strong motive. Brent denied any involvement in the case and maintained his innocence. During questioning, he had noticeable scratches on his hands, possibly from a struggle with Misty. When questioned by the police, Brent explained that his dog had pulled him while he was skateboarding, causing him to fall and sustain scratches. The police obtained a search warrant for Brent's home. They discovered significant evidence there, including garbage bags identical to those found at the scene with Misty. In the garage, they found black rubber bands that matched the type of straps used to secure the bags on Misty's feet, along with duct tape and a rope with a specific weave that matched the material used to bind Misty. This evidence linked Brent to the case, and they then contacted the prosecutor's office. The district attorney deemed the evidence insufficient to prosecute, stating that they needed more information and confirmation of Brent's guilt beyond circumstantial evidence. Unfortunately, no new leads emerged for a long time. The police felt helpless as the murder suspect continued to live freely. Misty's family was devastated, convinced of Brent's guilt. Although he was under investigation, progress had stalled for weeks. After Misty's death, details of the case were leaked to the media, and her family hoped that public interest would reignite the investigation. Despite the media attention, there was still no progress. A year had passed since the case, but nothing had changed. During this time, Misty's parents pressured the police to seek justice. Meanwhile, the police continued to pursue every small clue, even when the case seemed to have reached a dead end. However, they were determined not to give up. In the fall of 2002, surprising information emerged from a genetics lab in Davis, California. However, it was not what the police expected. They discovered that the black hairs found on the tape from Misty's body were not human. They belonged to a dog. This reminded the police of a black dog at Brent's house. The police began to wonder if it was possible to identify animals by their fur, which had been done in a previous case. Further analysis revealed that Brent's dog had the same type of fur as the one found on the tape. The dog was a unique cross between a Rottweiler and a German Shepherd. This finding was more than just a coincidence. It represented a major breakthrough. The police now felt they had enough evidence to file charges. On October 23, 2002, Brent was arrested for the murder of Misty Morse. He maintained his innocence, claiming that he could not have committed such a heinous act. The prosecution argued that Brent's motive was his fear that Misty might become pregnant, which he believed could jeopardize his relationship with another girlfriend he loved dearly. They presented extensive circumstantial evidence, including dog hair analysis, that implicated Brent-related. Brent's attorney argued that the case against him was a complete fabrication, asserting that there was no credible evidence pointing to him as the perpetrator. The defense attempted to discredit Misty by highlighting her past, which angered her family, who believed she was a good person and did not deserve this tragedy. Brent's defense team also claimed that the medical examiner was unable to conclusively determine Misty's cause of death. Additionally, there was no weapon or witness to link Brent to the crime, but despite their efforts, the defense was unsuccessful in proving his innocence. In May 2003, a jury convicted Brent Huck of first-degree murder with aggravating circumstances and kidnapping. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, and all of his appeals were denied. Brent is currently serving his sentence in a correctional facility in Florida. Although there is a clear connection between him and the crime, the motive remains unclear. Brent has never admitted guilt or shown remorse, and maintains that he had nothing to do with the murder. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Ryan Waller. Heather Kwan plans to celebrate her 21st birthday with her boyfriend, Ryan Waller, and then visit his parents. Ryan is a charming young man who plays the guitar very well. Although he has moved out of his parents' house, he still maintains a good relationship with his family. Heather recently moved into Ryan's apartment in his neighborhood in Phoenix, Arizona. She is very excited to be living with her boyfriend. The couple has a strong relationship, and although they seem to have different views on life, Heather has graduated from high school and enrolled in college to study law. According to friends and family, she is a kind and compassionate person who always tries to help and support those around her. In contrast, Ryan has a more serious attitude and is focused on his future. He also attends the same college as Heather. Despite their differences, they seem to complement each other very well, and their opposing views do not lead to conflict. The couple's life together is going well. They had been living together for a month and a half. On December 25, 2006, everything was prepared at Ryan's family home for dinner. However, Heather and Ryan were missing. They did not arrive on time, which worried Ryan's family because it was unusual for them to be late. Initially, the family waited for a while before starting the festive dinner without the couple. They assumed that Heather and Ryan were just enjoying their time together and had lost track of time. As time passed and the couple still had not arrived, Ryan's family started calling his cell phone, but he did not answer. This day was very important to them. They knew that Ryan and his girlfriend would never miss the festive dinner, not only for Heather's birthday, but also for Christmas. Although Ryan's parents had already started eating, they decided to postpone the meal because they were worried. Ryan's sister said she went to younger brother's apartment earlier in the day, but no one answered the door. At the time, she thought it was normal and assumed the couple had just gone out. However, she now felt suspicious. The family had not seen the couple for 2 days. Concerned, Ryan's mother went to the police station to request a welfare check on Ryan and Heather. However, the police were busy that evening due to an increase in calls, which often happens around the holidays. Since the initial concerns seemed minor, the officers did not consider the request urgent, and the family had to wait. The police finally arrived at the couple's apartment a few hours later. By then, Ryan's parents were extremely worried. His father had been waiting for the police near the apartment complex and became even more concerned when his son did not answer the phone or respond to knocks on the door. Heather did not answer either. After several unsuccessful knocks, the officers had no choice but to break down the door. Once inside, they found Ryan in the living room, suffering from severe facial injuries. Fortunately, he was still alive. He appeared to be in shock, unable to move much or answer the officers' questions clearly. When asked about the girl, Ryan said she was sleeping in another room. However, when the officers checked, they found her dead on the couch. She had injuries similar to Ryan's, indicating that she had been beaten. Most of the blows were directed at her face, causing abrasions, bleeding, and open wounds. Her cause of death was determined to be due to gunfire. Police quickly suspected Ryan's involvement in the incident for several reasons. First, he was the only person found alive in the apartment. Second, he appeared to have escaped serious injury, unlike his girlfriend. Additionally, there were no signs of forced entry. Ryan was speaking strangely, which made the officers suspicious of him. They decided that he did not require medical attention and placed him in a patrol car while they continued to investigate the crime scene. Ryan was the prime suspect from the start. Tragically, Heather was dead. She had been dead for about a day. He had apparently spent several hours in the house next to Heather's body. Ryan claimed that he did not remember anything. The police thought that Ryan might have tried to cover up the crime. Initially, Ryan was put in a patrol car, where he sat for about 4 to 5 hours. Later that morning, he was taken to the police station and questioned. At the station, all of Ryan's clothes were taken for laboratory analysis, and he was given a thin cotton suit. He was officially informed that he was a suspect in the murder. From the beginning, Ryan spoke to police officer Paul Dalton, who dismissed the possibility that Ryan might have been seriously injured. Ryan was never examined by a doctor. Instead, he was taken to an interrogation room and left alone. Ryan seemed confused about the situation. For the first few minutes, he mumbled incomprehensibly to himself, as recorded by the camera. But his words were inaudible. After about half an agonizing hour, the police finally entered the room to begin questioning. Ryan was informed of his rights and asked if he understood why he was there. He replied that he knew nothing, that he wanted to sleep, and that he had a bad headache. Paul immediately began pressuring Ryan. He insisted that he did not know what had happened in his apartment. The recording shows that he sounded tired and unwell, struggling to form coherent sentences. In order to defend himself psychologically, he had previously curled up in a corner, hugging his knees to his chest like a frightened child. He repeatedly expressed his desire to go home. However, Paul had other intentions. He wanted to extract a confession regarding the murder. As the interrogation continued, Ryan's behavior became increasingly erratic. He even forgot his girlfriend's name and could not answer the question, no matter how hard he tried. He had difficulty pronouncing her name correctly, and at one point confused it with a nickname. He also misremembered her age, insisting she was 16 or 17, even though she was actually 21. When Officer Paul asked Ryan about the black eye, he spent a long time thinking, but could not remember what had happened. He eventually suggested that he had gotten into a fight with his girlfriend and that she had hit him. This explanation could have been influenced by Ryan's injuries or condition. However, Officer Paul found this story unconvincing and suspected that Ryan was trying to deceive him. Ryan then forgot his girlfriend's name again. He began telling the police that either Christina or Alicia had attacked him. Given his strange reactions, it was clear that something was wrong. Ryan struggled to form sentences and had significant gaps in his memory. However, Officer Paul dismissed these issues, believing that Ryan had only been hit in the face and had not suffered any serious injuries. Paul disregarded Ryan's behavior during the interrogation and suspected that he was trying to mislead the investigation. Meanwhile, the recording shows Ryan repeatedly saying that he wanted to go home, that he was tired, and that he needed to sleep. It seemed that he did not fully understand the situation, but he was not allowed to lie down and rest. No one would let him leave. Eventually, Ryan began to recall events differently. He started recounting the robbery, stating that his girlfriend had died and mentioning a young man named Richie Carver and his father, Larry Carver, who had lived there before Heather moved in. According to Ryan, a group of criminals had started attacking after breaking into the house. Ryan's story changed dramatically when he insisted that Richie had attacked him. Although Ryan was confused about the situation, he remembered that Richie had come to the house to take some belongings. Initially, Ryan did not remember what weapons the intruders had used, but he later stated that they had 2 handguns. In a surprising turn of events, Ryan gave the police an unexpected statement. He claimed that they had attacked both Heather and him, explaining that the bruises on his face were caused by the handguns. Ryan's behavior in the interrogation room may have been due to the severity of the injuries he had sustained, which could have put him in a dangerous situation. Ryan's memory gaps and constant urge to lie down or leave were understandable given his condition. If Ryan had been telling the truth, the bullet would still be lodged in his head, and he would have suffered internal bleeding and possibly died. However, Officer Paul found this explanation unconvincing. Paul chose to focus on the fact that Ryan had changed his story several times. To Paul, this indicated that Ryan was lying, which only added to his suspicions. As a result, the interrogation continued. Despite Ryan's condition and behavior, Paul did not believe anything he said. Paul thought that if Ryan had really been shot in the eye, he would not be alive to talk to him. He would be dead, like Heather. It was clear that Ryan was exhibiting a range of symptoms. The police should have recognized this, as all police officers are trained to identify such problems. Recognizing a traumatic brain injury is not difficult, especially when the signs are so obvious. However, Paul refused to acknowledge the situation. He believed that Ryan was trying to trick him and insisted that Ryan continue to answer his questions, stating that Ryan would not be allowed to go home or sleep. Paul tried to piece together what had happened, clarifying the details and identifying any inconsistencies that might support his suspicions. He kept asking Ryan questions. Ryan tried to explain who the attackers shot first, whether he had called the emergency services, why he had not been able to contact rescuers, and why he had not answered his parents' calls or opened the door for his father. However, Ryan was struggling with a brain hemorrhage that was worsening his condition. Despite not being able to remember even what he had eaten for breakfast, the interrogation continued. Ryan realized what was happening and understood that he was in a dangerous situation. He tried to convince the police officer, Paul, that he was telling the truth. In a last desperate attempt, Ryan approached the police officer and looked him straight in the eye. At that moment, Paul noticed that Ryan was injured by a gunshot. However, Paul did not take the situation seriously and did not assist Ryan go out. Ryan continued to walk to the exit by himself, leaning against the wall despite having a bullet in his head. Eventually, paramedics arrived and loaded him onto a stretcher to take him to the hospital. When they arrived, the doctors quickly assessed Ryan's condition and realized that it had worsened significantly due to the delay caused by the police. Ryan should have received medical attention as soon as he was found in the apartment, which had been at least 7-8 hours prior. The doctors discovered a bullet lodged in his head, and he was bleeding profusely. But Ryan could no longer undergo surgery due to a brain infection. The bullet could only be removed from Ryan's skull after 3 days because it was not safe to operate earlier. During this time, Ryan experienced pain and cognitive problems. He finally had surgery on December 28, but his recovery took more than a month, during which he was hospitalized. Unfortunately, the bullet and the police's mistakes caused severe and irreversible brain damage, especially in the infected area. As a result, Ryan's left eye stopped functioning and could not be saved. The most concerning issue was the seizures that neurosurgeons discovered during his recovery, which will affect him for the rest of his life. Neurosurgeons believe that if the police had taken him to the hospital immediately, the severity of the injury could have been significantly reduced, and some of the problems could have been avoided altogether. Now, he must live with the consequences of this tragedy. Doctors discovered that Ryan had a broken jaw, which the medical team attributed to the police. This injury may have worsened Ryan's already serious condition due to the bullet in his head. The medical team that operated on Ryan and monitored his recovery noted that the police's actions had significantly contributed to his injuries. Meanwhile, the police continued their investigation. Paul Dalton recognized his previous mistakes and was committed to uncovering the truth about the crime. He tried to shed light on the case involving Heather and Ryan. The police investigated the events that led to the tragic incident. On that day, Ryan and Heather had spent the day at home, ordering pizza, and everything seemed normal, like any other day. Neighbors reported that after the pizza was delivered, Richie, who had previously lived with Ryan, arrived. An argument ensued between Richie and Ryan, after which Richie left. According to Ryan's neighbors, the couple were good-natured individuals with no criminal records, mental health issues, or harmful addictions, and they lived a quiet and stable life. Richie, on the other hand, had a reputation in the criminal world and had faced numerous prosecutions for various crimes, although he had not been involved in violent crimes. Police suspected Richie was responsible for the attack. Ryan mentioned Richie's name during questioning, suggesting that the attack may have been motivated by revenge. Although Ryan's memories remained unclear, they provided valuable information that helped the police piece together the events leading up to Heather's death. Ryan Waller was no longer considered a suspect. Instead, he was recognized as a witness and victim of a crime that he had survived. The location of the house at the end of a cul-de-sac made it isolated. Ryan struggled to remember the entire sequence of events due to his memory problems. He mentioned Richie, but the suspect denied any wrongdoing. The police stated that no evidence linking Richie to the incident was found at the scene. The motive behind the crime remains unclear. Ryan and Heather did not possess any valuables that could attract a robber to target them. It will take time to piece together what happened. Neurosurgeons believe that Ryan is still in rehabilitation even after being discharged from the hospital a month ago. Therefore, it is hoped that he can contribute to the investigation by remembering some details. After some time, when Ryan's condition improved slightly, he recalled that on December 24, he and Heather woke up in their apartment in the morning. It was a normal day for them before the Christmas holidays, and everyone was happy. Additionally, the couple had planned to visit Ryan's relatives to celebrate Heather's birthday and Christmas. Ryan remembered that in the morning, he and his girlfriend Heather were in the kitchen when they heard a knock on the door. Ryan went to the door to check who it was. When he opened the door, he saw Richie Carver and Richie's father, Larry, both armed. Ryan tried to close the door quickly, but they attacked him before he could react, knocking him unconscious. Richie and Larry then moved into the next room, where Heather was sitting on the couch. They attacked her, killed her, and stole several valuables and a computer from the apartment. Ryan recalled that Richie had always been very jealous of him, and they often argued. Eventually, Ryan suggested that Richie move out to get away from his annoying neighbor and strengthen his relationship with Heather. This angered Richie, leading to a conflict between him and Ryan. The police were unable to determine the exact motive behind the attack, but Ryan's account of the incident seemed credible. Only the perpetrators could confirm the details. The official explanation was that it was a robbery, as several items, including a computer, were stolen from the house. Surprisingly, it was revealed that Larry, the attacker's biological father, was also involved as an accomplice. Although they were apparently committing a robbery, the main motive seemed to be revenge, as several witnesses reported that Richie frequently visited his old home. It was concluded that Heather died instantly during the attack. It is likely that the criminals killed her because she was an unwanted witness. Ryan, on the other hand, was luckier. The bullet did not penetrate deeply into his brain, so he was only unconscious. The criminals probably believed he was dead and left the scene without attempting to finish him off. They quickly took whatever valuables they could find, and the entire ordeal lasted only a few minutes. Ryan was unconscious for several hours, and when he finally woke up, his brain was damaged, leaving him unaware of his surroundings. He mistakenly thought that Heather was just sleeping on the couch and didn't want to disturb her. So he went to bed and spent most of the time sleeping, unaware of the tragedy that had occurred. After the incident, Richie and Larry suspected that Ryan had survived the attack, but the police kept this information secret to protect him. Richie and Larry were eventually arrested and found to be in possession of several items stolen from Ryan's apartment, as well as 2 murder weapons. Experts later determined that the shots that wounded Ryan and Heather had been fired by Richie. Richie Carver faced charges including murder, burglary, and unlawful use of a weapon, which resulted in a sentence of life in prison without parole. His father was also convicted. Initially, Larry's wife claimed that he had confessed to her, but she later decided not to testify for the prosecution out of fear. Fortunately, Larry's mother bravely testified against him. The prosecutor's office presented a substantial amount of evidence, leading to a jury convicting Larry Carver of first-degree murder and robbery, resulting in a sentence of life in prison without parole. Years after the murderers were convicted, Ryan's father sued the Phoenix Police Department. He had watched his only son suffer from years of pain after the attack and felt frustrated with the way the police handled the case. Ryan experienced seizures, cognitive impairment, and constant headaches. Ryan's father accused police officer Paul Dalton of falsifying evidence and distorting details of the case, which Paul attempted to refute. As it turned out, Paul had a history of controversy and often failed to follow proper procedures. Ryan died 10 years later from a seizure that caused him to fall and sustain a fatal head injury. The tragic event attracted significant media attention. However, Ryan's parents chose to stay away from reporters. His father gave only one interview, in which he shared his efforts to seek justice for his son. Welcome back to our channel. Today we will explore a new case. The case of Jennifer Kess. Jennifer was an American woman from Orlando, Florida. She attended the University of Central Florida in Orlando, graduating in 2003 with a degree in finance. In 2006, 24-year-old, she seemed to have everything going for her. She had a thriving personal life, was excelling at work. She currently works as a financial manager at Central Florida Investments timeshare company in Ocoee, and recently purchased a condo in Orlando. According to her best friend, Jennifer was always cautious about her safety and carried pepper spray with her at all times. On Sunday, January 22, 2006, Jennifer returned from a vacation with her boyfriend, Rob Allen. They had been dating for about a year. Since Rob lived approximately 3 hours away from Jennifer's apartment in Orlando, they could only see each other on weekends. On Monday, January 23, Jennifer returned to work after her vacation. That day, she called her mother, Joyce Kessie, to talk about her trip. Joyce later said Jennifer sounded happy and refreshed during the call. After work, Jennifer went home and called her boyfriend around 10 p.m. The conversation did not go well. Jennifer felt upset, as she believed Rob didn't love her enough. She was frustrated that they lived far apart and could only see each other on weekends. She told him that this arrangement wasn't enough for her. The two argued, and the call ended on a bad note. Rob could not have imagined that this would be their final conversation. The next morning, after Rob called her early in the morning as usual, his call went straight to her voicemail. Jennifer didn't show up to work and stopped answering her phone, which was highly unusual. Concerned, her coworkers contacted her parents, who immediately became alarmed. On their way to Jennifer's apartment, her parents called local hospitals and reported her disappearance to the police. When Jennifer's parents arrived at her apartment, everything appeared normal. The apartment manager used a spare key to unlock the door, and they found her suitcase in a clean and tidy living space, as if a maid had just cleaned it. However, the bathroom was noticeably disorganized. Jennifer's mother explained that Jennifer often rushed out in the mornings, leaving the bathroom messy. Inside, they found scattered cosmetics, curling iron clamps, a wet crumpled towel, and water droplets everywhere. Jennifer's bedtime t-shirt was on the floor, all suggesting she had spent the night there. Strangely, her purse, keys, and cell phone were missing. It seemed evident that Jennifer had stayed at home the night before, woke up, started her usual morning routine, left the apartment, locked the door, and then disappeared. Jennifer's brother, Logan Kessie, began questioning nearby construction workers to find out if they had seen Jennifer or noticed anything suspicious that morning. However, the workers refused to cooperate or share any information, which fueled Logan's suspicion that they might know something, but were unwilling to speak. The Kessie family grew increasingly frustrated with the police, who initially showed little urgency. Authorities believed Jennifer might have had an argument with her boyfriend and left on her own, expecting her to return soon. Later that evening, when Jennifer still hadn't returned, the police officially declared her missing. Although evidence showed she had been in her apartment that morning, authorities initially speculated she might have been abducted the previous night. Based on cell tower data, they concluded she wasn't at home that night. However, her parents strongly disagreed, maintaining that she had stayed in her apartment overnight. Further analysis later confirmed that the initial interpretation of the cell data was incorrect. Jennifer had, in fact, spent the night in her apartment. Rob was questioned by investigators, and he provided a clear alibi, proving that he had nothing to do with his lover's death. Jennifer's family and friends immediately organized efforts to find her, distributing flyers with her photo and appeals for help throughout Orlando. Hundreds of people joined the search. However, as the hours turned into days, hope of finding Jennifer alive began to fade. The police struggled to find leads, and while various theories were proposed, nothing concrete emerged. Witnesses reported seeing Jennifer's car leaving her apartment complex around 7:40 a.m. on the morning she disappeared. However, they couldn't identify who was driving or which direction the car went. 2 days after Jennifer went missing, a tip came into the sheriff's office. Jennifer's car was found abandoned at the apartment complex, located nearly 2 kilometers from her own apartment. Jennifer had no known ties to this area, and her family stated that she had never been there before. When police found the car, they asked Rob to inspect it with them, as they were particularly interested in his reaction. Initially, police feared they might find Jennifer's body, but they found no signs of a struggle or foul play. The car appeared normal. Inside, they discovered Jennifer's cell phone, charger, sandals, and shoes, nothing out of place. Despite continued investigations, no additional evidence was found. The mystery of Jennifer Kess's disappearance persisted, leaving her family and friends in anguish, desperate for answers they might never fully receive. Was it a robbery or a car theft? Witnesses might have seen who was inside the car, but none could be located. However, police soon discovered crucial evidence when reviewing surveillance footage in the area where the car was found. Around noon on the day Jennifer disappeared, a camera recorded someone driving her car. The person briefly parked near the pool area, reversed, sat in the car for 32 seconds, then got out and walked away without looking back. The surveillance camera captured images every 3 seconds, but the individual's face was obscured each time by a fence post. As a result, their identity could not be determined. Based on the person's walk, police concluded it was a man about 1.65 meters tall, dressed like a construction worker. Detectives distributed the photo, hoping someone might recognize the man from his walk, height, or general appearance, but no leads emerged. At the time, renovations were underway at Jennifer's apartment complex. She had told her parents that construction workers would stop what they were doing and stare at her whenever she walked by. The workers frequently changed, and many were reportedly undocumented. Possibly because of this, they were uncooperative with the investigation and avoided speaking to the police. Due to language barriers, investigators were unable to question these individuals, and no additional evidence linking them to the case was discovered. There were no surveillance cameras in Jennifer's apartment building, and security relied only on a guard logging visitors' names. However, police found that the visitor log had been left blank. In addition, investigators failed to thoroughly search Jennifer's apartment. No security measures were implemented to protect her home, which allowed around 14 people to enter the apartment before the investigation moved forward. This mismanagement significantly harmed the case. Police were also unable to recover fingerprints from the steering wheel or rear-view mirror of Jennifer's car. It is uncertain whether these areas were wiped clean during the brief period when the car was parked. No traces of DNA were found in the vehicle either. Overall, the investigators' efforts were poorly executed, causing the case to stall. By 2008, on the second anniversary of Jennifer's disappearance, her family and friends gathered in Orlando, holding posters with her image in hopes that someone might recognize her. In 2009, a detective revisited the case with a fresh perspective. He tried to talk to a maid who had worked at Jennifer's apartment complex since 2006. The woman said she remembered the young woman's disappearance. When detectives showed her the surveillance photo of the person seen driving Jennifer's car, the maid commented that he looked like a man she had seen before. She wasn't entirely sure, but the man's walk and hairstyle reminded her of him. The detective discovered that the man had previously lived and worked at Jennifer's apartment complex. He had performed maintenance work in Jennifer's apartment just a week before she disappeared. Tracking the man down was easy. He was serving time in a Florida prison for assaulting a young woman, a crime committed 2 years after Jennifer's disappearance. The detective met with him and questioned him about his work in Jennifer's apartment. He admitted to performing maintenance there and claimed that Jennifer had let him in before leaving for work. When shown the surveillance photo of a person resembling him, the man denied it was him, pointing out that the individual appeared to be about 10 centimeters shorter than he is. He was cooperative and denied any involvement. He agreed to take a polygraph test, which he passed. The detective then interviewed another worker who had assisted the man with repairs at Jennifer's apartment. The co-worker confirmed they had worked there and stated that everything had gone smoothly. The detective also spoke to the apartment complex manager to check if Jennifer had experienced any conflicts with the man or others. The manager reported that they had noticed no issues. In 2010, this detective was removed from Jennifer's case. Over time, the Kessie family began to feel that the Orlando Police Department had abandoned them. But the police insisted the investigation was still active. In reality, the case had been largely neglected. In 2016, a decade after Jennifer's disappearance, she was officially declared dead in Florida. 2 years later, in December 2018, her parents, Joyce and Drew Kessie, filed a lawsuit against the Orlando Police Department to gain access to police records from the case. The lawsuit was settled in March 2019. The Orlando police chief gave investigators 6 months to review the case. But when no new leads emerged, he made a pivotal decision. In an unprecedented move, the police department handed over all case materials to the Kessie family. Jennifer's parents received more than 16,000 pages of documents and 67 hours of video and audio recordings. By mutual agreement, the official investigation was closed. The Kessie family then hired private detective to review the case. After examining the files 3 times, the detective expressed shock at the many critical mistakes and oversights made by the Orlando police. The detective began by revisiting the crime scene and speaking with residents of Jennifer's apartment complex. One neighbor had lived there for 2 years before Jennifer disappeared, shared her concerns. She initially appreciated the gated complex with security, but grew uneasy when construction workers began occupying empty apartments. She explained, "When I came home from work, there would be a group of drunk men outside. They would yell unpleasant things or stare at me inappropriately as I walked by. It made me very uncomfortable." Despite complaining to the building management, no action was taken. Another neighbor described even more troubling experiences. She revealed that construction workers had entered her apartment while she was away. She noticed unsettling signs, such as her underwear drawer being opened, evidence of someone using her shower, and footprints in her closet. She also recalled a disturbing incident where she caught one of the workers watching her through a window while engaging in indecent behavior. She reported the incident to the police, but the man was never held accountable. He was merely fired and disappeared. A third neighbor revealed that a construction worker had approached her in the parking lot at night, attempting to start conversations and coming across as overly pushy. She said she encountered him several times a week. In contrast, a fourth neighbor had a more positive impression of the same worker. She said, "I remember him as cheerful, friendly, and talkative." She moved into the complex shortly after Jennifer's disappearance and recalled that this worker frequently visited her apartment. However, Jennifer's name was never mentioned in their conversations. What unsettled this neighbor was that 9 months after Jennifer vanished, the worker suddenly left the complex overnight and disappeared. The man was found through descriptions from neighbors and passed a polygraph test. At this time, when the investigation progressed, the detective uncovered a potential lead. 10 months after Jennifer vanished, a witness reported seeing someone throw a rolled-up carpet into a lake near her apartment complex. At the time, construction workers living in an apartment across from Jennifer's were seen moving carpets, raising suspicions that Jennifer's body might have been hidden in one of the carpets and discarded in the lake. In November 2019, 12 years after Jennifer's disappearance, local police, along with a team of divers, searched the lake where the carpet was reportedly dumped. Despite searching for 2 days, no evidence was found. It has now been 13 years since Jennifer Kessie vanished. After investigating the case for several years, private detective proposed a new theory about her disappearance. Based on interviews with residents of Jennifer's apartment complex, he discovered that approximately 10 construction workers had been living in an empty apartment directly across from Jennifer's unit. He speculated that on the morning of January 24, 2006, as Jennifer was leaving her apartment and locking her door, some of these workers attacked her from behind and dragged her into the vacant apartment. Unfortunately, identifying these individuals has proven impossible, as there are no records or contracts documenting their names. Jennifer's parents have dedicated their lives to finding her. Despite investing significant time and money, they have not yet succeeded. Jennifer's mother expressed the pain of their ongoing search, saying, "It's very, very hard to move forward. The hole in our hearts will remain until we have answers." Jennifer's boyfriend, Rob Allen, also shared that he frequently thinks of her and imagines the life they might have had together if not for this tragedy. The Jennifer Kessie case remains one of the most mysterious and heartbreaking missing persons cases, enduring for more than 18 years without clear answers. The Kessie family continues to seek justice and holds hope that one day, new clues will emerge to help solve the case. The Kessie family remains hopeful for Jennifer's return. They are offering a $15,000 reward for any information that could lead to her whereabouts. Despite extensive investigations and search efforts, Jennifer's whereabouts remain unknown to this day. This case serves as a poignant reminder of the importance of sustaining public interest and support in the pursuit of justice for missing persons. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Susan McFarland. Susan McFarland was born on December 31, 1958. She is the youngest of 4 children and spent most of her childhood in the suburbs of St. Louis, Missouri, in the United States. During her high school years, she was very active, serving on the student council and participating in the French club. She also engaged in sports and prepared to go to college. After graduating from high school in 1977, she enrolled in college. Upon completing her studies, she earned a degree in accounting and began her career, working in various industries before becoming an accountant at a telephone company. Susan is a very active and entertaining person who maintains a lively lifestyle. She enjoys being around others, engaging in conversation, and having fun, which leads her to attend social dinners and many work-related events. People who know Susan praise her vibrant personality. In 1988, at one of these social gatherings, she met Richard McFarland, a stockbroker. Interestingly, Richard had attended the same school as Susan, but graduated 2 years earlier. Despite being at the same school, they had never met or known each other. Richard was active and loved sports. He played water polo, worked as a sound engineer and lighting technician for stage productions, and contributed to the school newspaper. In contrast to his girlfriend Susan, he was calmer and more reserved, which surprised many of her friends, as they thought the two seemed quite different. Despite these differences, their relationship continued to thrive. They married in 1989, and Susan had 3 sons. During this time, Susan took on the responsibility of raising the children while Richard faced many challenges. He struggled to maintain a steady job and was easily distracted by various get-rich-quick schemes. As network marketing companies became popular, Richard decided to join one. He sold high-priced household items, promoting their benefits to convince customers to purchase expensive products. Meanwhile, as Susan's children grew up, she landed a high-paying job. In 1998, her company moved its headquarters to San Antonio, Texas, which required the family to relocate. During this time, Susan's income surpassed Richard's, helping the family maintain financial stability. By 2000, Richard had tried many different careers, including brokerage sales and telemarketing, but none were successful. He eventually decided to focus on a new field: online sales. Although their relationship seemed stable, Susan McFarland was actually facing significant challenges. She considered divorce, and the couple even sought help from a family psychologist, as Richard did not want to abandon his wife and children. By the fall of 2002, the relationship had not improved, and Susan was feeling desperate and seriously contemplating divorce. She was hesitant because her husband threatened to take away their children and most of her savings. In late November, Susan spoke to a friend, expressing her frustration with Richard and stating that she could no longer stand him. She was upset by his constant problems at work, his immaturity, and his complete lack of responsibility. She felt that he was a failure who was holding the family back, and that they were only able to maintain a decent life thanks to her hard work and success. Susan felt she could not rely on him for anything. On November 25, 2002, Susan expressed to her friend that Richard was acting strangely. She even mentioned feeling paranoid, believing that someone might be tapping her phone and monitoring her computer. To help her relax, a friend invited Susan to go on vacation, but she declined because she was very busy. The next day, Susan did not show up for work and was absent for 3 days until Thanksgiving. At approximately 3 a.m. on November 29, 2002, a police patrol officer spotted a black Ford Explorer SUV parked in a vacant lot about a block from Susan's house. The car had been abandoned, with the keys still in the ignition. The officer ran the license plate and discovered that it belonged to Susan, but they were unable to contact her. They then contacted Richard to inform him about the car. During the call, Richard acted strangely and expressed that he did not want the police to come to his home. The officers decided to lock the car and take the keys. The officer followed procedure by locking the car and taking the keys to the station. That evening, Richard went to the city police station. Not only did he retrieve the keys, but he also reported to the police that his wife, Susan, was missing. He mentioned that the last time he saw her was on November 25 at approximately 9:30 p.m. Susan had planned to go on vacation with a friend, but according to Richard, she never returned. He also contacted her friends and learned that Susan did not attend a meeting they had arranged. After a brief conversation, the police took Richard to the parking lot where his wife's car was parked. He did not approach the car or look inside. Instead, he walked around the car several times for about 10 minutes. He eventually got into his car and drove with the police to the station, then went home. It was strange that he did not take the car even though he had the keys, which aroused suspicion. One of the officers decided to check the car. When he arrived at the parking lot, he inspected the outside and saw a drop of blood on the dashboard near the passenger seat. The officers also returned to talk to Richard again. During this time, they noticed that he had scratches on his knuckles and an injury to his pinky finger. While talking to the police, Richard appeared calm, but was evasive and did not answer most of their questions. However, he agreed to cooperate and allow them to search his home. The police found a few drops of blood on the bathroom wall and a stain on the bedroom door frame. A small lock of light-colored hair was found stuck in the bathroom door. The police also inspected Richard's car and found that the interior floor mats had been replaced, which raised suspicions. A few hours after the search for Susan began, a neighbor of Susan's who lived across the street contacted the police station. She provided valuable information. On November 26, 2002, she saw a white pickup truck parked near the driveway. The truck, later identified as Richard's, was parked there for unclear reasons. She tried to call him but was unsuccessful. The strange events continued when, around noon on November 29, 2002, she discovered an unfamiliar car in her garage. The car was unlocked. She checked the title and found a black wallet containing Richard's papers. There were also cans of gasoline, pesticides, and bags of charcoal, which appeared to have been brought there by Richard. Additionally, the neighbor reported that a pair of pruning shears she had used for gardening was missing. The neighbor called the police to report some incidents. When the police arrived, they discovered Richard's paperwork inside a car. Interestingly, when the police tried to check the license plate, they realized that the car had been stolen, prompting them to contact the owner. The man confirmed that his car had been stolen, but he did not understand why it had been taken. The police decided to examine the car. Inside, they found a map, 2 rolls of tissue paper on the passenger seat, packs of bandages, and a soda can, which appeared to be common items. In a second package, there were brown shoes, a blue shirt, a roll of plastic bags, duct tape, and another tissue. On the back seat, a wicker basket caught the attention of the police because it was similar to the one found on Susan's back porch. There was also a shovel in the back seat. However, the police were most concerned about a drop of blood on the rear bumper below the license plate. The police suspected that Richard might have stolen the car, but his actions were puzzling. Why would he leave his documents in a stolen car, and how did they end up in a neighbor's garage? At that time, there was no evidence of a violent crime. They believed that Susan was still alive and had simply disappeared. However, the police still thought that Richard had something to do with her disappearance. To find Susan, they needed to act quickly. The police contacted Susan's friend, who said she had not heard from Susan since November 25. On that day, Susan had confided in her about her plans for a divorce. She was determined to end her marriage and planned to begin the divorce process soon. Susan's friend reported that on Thanksgiving Day, Richard called her and asked to speak with Susan. However, Susan had not gone on vacation with her. During the call, Richard asked strange and inconsistent questions. News of Susan's disappearance reached her family, prompting them to travel to Texas to assist in the search. On their journey, they met several of Susan's close friends. Her co-workers reported that Susan was last seen on November 25. She was expected to come to work the following day but never arrived, which was unusual for her. Several co-workers also knew about her plans for a divorce. Witnesses said that divorce papers had been prepared on December 2, but Susan had intended to keep this information secret until then. A folder containing these divorce documents was later discovered in Susan's office. The police reviewed Richard's phone records and conversations and discovered that he had ordered a pizza on the evening of November 25. They contacted the delivery person, who reported that Richard had met him while wearing rubber gloves, which raised some suspicions. Additionally, the police gathered important information from the housekeeper who had visited the couple's home. Her next visit was scheduled for November 29. During an interview on December 5, the housekeeper expressed surprise at how unusually clean the house was. The family had never cleaned it themselves before, which caught her attention. It appeared that Richard had cleaned the house while wearing gloves. Furthermore, the housekeeper observed several other strange behaviors, particularly Richard's suspicious and distant attitude regarding his wife's disappearance. Richard's strange behavior continued to escalate. Neighbors reported seeing him wandering aimlessly for hours and driving around the neighborhood during the day. One day, he parked his car in front of his house and stared at one spot for about an hour before getting out of the car. He then returned with a lawnmower and began mowing a neighbor's lawn, despite the neighbor's attempts to stop him. By this time, the police were convinced that Susan was not only missing, but had also been attacked by her husband. It took some time to obtain a search warrant for the car, which was found in a neighbor's garage. Meanwhile, the police spoke to the true owner of the missing car, who shared a strange story. He had met a stranger in a park near a gas station who wanted to test drive the car. The stranger got into the car, but instead of driving around the parking lot, he disappeared. By the time the owner realized the car had been stolen, the thief had already fled. When shown a photo of Richard, the owner identified him as the thief. As the unusual circumstances surrounding Susan's disappearance began to attract the attention of her close friends, everyone turned to Richard to find out what was going on. However, he kept giving different accounts. His version of events seemed to change constantly. Richard himself acted strangely, and even asked Susan's best friend what the police had found in the car from the neighbor's garage, seemingly forgetting that he had left some items there. Richard claimed that Susan had been with him at the gas station that night, and that she was the one who had stolen the car. However, the car's owner verified this account and noted that no woman was present at the time. Unfortunately, Richard has yet to provide any useful information regarding Susan's disappearance. Richard was still on the run when Susan's family began distributing flyers on December 4. Volunteers and search parties, including dogs, scoured the city, focusing on the area where Susan's abandoned car had been found. Interestingly, Richard seemed unconcerned about his wife's fate. He repeatedly told Susan's family that she had likely run away. However, Susan's relatives were skeptical of his claims, knowing the details of their life together. All of Susan's belongings were left at home, and it was clear that she would not abandon her children. Despite this, Richard stuck to his story and refused to communicate with Susan's family. He even prevented her family from seeing the children. Susan's family was aware that she had been planning to divorce Richard for about a year, which heightened their fears that he might be involved in her disappearance. However, no one took this possibility seriously at first, and everyone remained hopeful of finding Susan safe. On December 5, DNA samples were collected from Richard for analysis, but the search for Susan did not yield any results until December 13. The police decided to return to Richard's home, and after 8 hours of investigation, they recovered 2 guns, ammunition, a computer, and some documents for further examination. When asked about the divorce proceedings, Richard mentioned that the problems in their relationship had begun a long time ago. He believed they were moving toward separation, but claimed he had no idea that Susan had planned to give him divorce papers on December 2. The police later discovered that Susan intended to evict Richard from the house she had purchased herself. Furthermore, Susan's family revealed that her mother had reported someone hacking her voicemail and email at work just days before Susan went missing. This raised suspicions about Richard. By the time the police investigated further, a substantial amount of incriminating evidence had been collected, but they decided not to disclose it immediately. They hoped this strategy would lead to Richard being caught in a lie. As time passed without a ransom demand from the kidnappers, the possibility of Susan's abduction was eliminated. On December 17, the police released an official report naming Richard as a suspect in Susan's murder. The police chief stated that there was enough circumstantial evidence to suspect Richard of kidnapping and murdering his wife. However, Susan's body had still not been found. Richard, who had hired 2 lawyers by this time, chose not to cooperate with the investigation. Meanwhile, search efforts continued, with police dogs, officers on horseback, and aircraft searching from the air. Several volunteer organizations sent teams to assist, but these searches also yielded no clues. As of December 31, the search continued with no sign of her. She had not been found and had been missing for over a month, suggesting that the chances of her being returned safely were slim. The police were awaiting the results of DNA tests to determine whose blood was found in a stolen car and in Richard's home. It was believed that the blood belonged to Susan. In early January 2003, the police station received an anonymous tip, which led to a large-scale search of the city park. Unfortunately, the tip was false, and as of January 13, there had been no progress. On January 14, a new witness contacted the police, reporting suspicious activity at a farm located 30 kilometers from Susan's home. The witness had seen an unfamiliar car drive down the road and then turn around slowly, as if the driver was unsure of where to go. When the witness approached to offer help, the driver accelerated and drove away. This behavior was very strange, especially since the area was very remote, making encounters with unknown vehicles unusual. The witness later discovered that part of his fence had been thrown into a pile and set on fire. He found several suspicious objects in the pile of destroyed fence. He informed the police that the unknown vehicle had appeared in the week after Thanksgiving, which coincided with the time of Susan's disappearance. The police investigated the area and found the wrapper of a rare Italian popsicle that Richard liked. After a short search, they discovered an old homemade trailer that had been burned. Inside, they found a human body that was so charred that the gender and identity of the body could not be determined. The body was then sent for forensic analysis for further investigation. Additionally, plant and soil samples were collected to compare with particles found on Richard's shoes and shovel. Richard was eventually arrested and initially charged with carjacking, attempted witness bribery, and tampering with evidence. His bail was set at $450, but he remained in jail because he could not pay it. Child Protective Services removed Richard's 3 sons from the home, and Susan's sister subsequently filed for custody. The eldest son, aged 11, was placed with Susan's family, while the 2 younger boys were placed with a foster family. Tests later confirmed the identity of the body as Susan's. The medical examiner's report indicated that she died from blunt force trauma to the head. On January 18, Richard was charged with first-degree murder. However, the prosecutor's office announced that it did not plan to pursue the death penalty. Given the seriousness of the crime, it is likely that he will receive a life sentence. Susan's family confronted Richard, but this only made them more upset. They had hoped to see remorse and regret from him. Instead, they were met with indifference and a blank look on Richard's face. Despite having killed his wife and leaving their young children with another family, Richard remained completely calm and showed no remorse. The hearing began on February 9, 2004. Richard reached a plea deal with the prosecution, admitting to murdering his wife. He was sentenced to 40 years in prison and was paroled after serving 19 years. In his confession, he stated that he killed Susan when he learned she wanted a divorce because he could not bear the thought of her leaving him with nothing. After the crime, he took Susan's remains to a remote area and burned them. Welcome back to our channel. Today, we will explore a new case, the case of Bruno Fernandez. Eliza Samurio was born on February 22, 1985, near Brazil's capital. Her father, Luis Carlos Samurio, was an architect, while her mother, Sonia Fatima Silva, worked on a farm. Their marriage was short-lived and unhappy, leading to a divorce when Eliza was just 6 months old. Luis was abusive toward Sonia, putting her life at risk multiple times. After the divorce, he refused to allow Sonia to keep Eliza, threatening her safety. Consequently, Sonia had to leave home without her daughter. She opened a small farm and met a man with whom she later had a son. Now, Sonia rarely saw her daughter. When Eliza turned 10, Sonia gathered her courage and took the girl away from Luis. They quickly bonded with Sonia's son and enjoyed a peaceful life together for a year. However, Luis returned to reclaim Eliza, using threats of violence to force her back. Eliza was unhappy living with her father, who was cruel to her. As a teenager, he exploited her by making her entertain his friends for money. When she turned 18, Eliza decided to leave her father and move to Sao Paulo. Her biggest dreams were to become a model and marry a football player. Since childhood, she adored this sport and dreamed of starting a family with a professional player. When Eliza arrived in Sao Paulo, she had little money and no connections. She aimed to work as a model and build a successful career. However, things did not go as she had hoped. She was not accepted for any modeling jobs. To survive and earn some money, she resorted to selling herself. During this time, she also appeared in several adult films while searching for modeling opportunities. Her photos were published in Brazilian magazines. Through her connections in the modeling industry, she attended football events where she met several famous players, including Bruno Fernandez, a goalkeeper born in 1984. Mutual friends claimed they met in 2008 at a barbecue in Rio de Janeiro, but later, Bruno changed the story, saying they actually met at an adult party organized by a friend. Eliza becomes Bruno's mistress. Although he is married and in a relationship with another woman, he plays for the famous Brazilian football team Flamengo. Bruno was not seeking a serious relationship since he was married and wanted to maintain his reputation. However, through mutual friends, he promised Eliza that he would divorce his wife for her. Bruno often spent the night at Eliza's house, and they enjoyed time together away from the media to avoid any complications. Their relationship lasted a few months until Eliza revealed that she was pregnant. They both recalled that unfortunate night when Bruno's protection failed. Bruno reacted poorly to the news, viewing Eliza as just a passing distraction. He pressured Eliza to abort the pregnancy, and even bribed people to gain her trust and influence her decision to terminate the pregnancy. Despite this, Eliza was determined to keep the child and become a mother. This conflict led to numerous scandals, and their relationship quickly fell apart. In October of that year, Eliza filed a police report about an attempted kidnapping and stalking. She gained public attention and was featured on Brazilian television as Bruno's secret pregnant mistress. Additionally, she described Bruno as a very cruel person whom she feared, and this information was included in her police report. Eliza expressed concern that Bruno might try to induce a miscarriage by secretly adding medication to her food. Unfortunately, the court did not thoroughly investigate her claims, and by the end of the trial, Bruno was only issued a restraining order that required him to stay at least 300 meters away from Eliza. Although she sought further protection, the judge deemed it unnecessary since their relationship was unofficial and not taken into account in the ruling. Eliza asked Bruno for financial support to cover their child's medical expenses and to provide better nutrition. Bruno, however, refused, claiming that the child might not be his, but could belong to another man because Eliza had lived a promiscuous life. Eliza insisted that she had not been with anyone else since meeting Bruno. Despite her claims, Bruno denied being the child's father. In 2010, a boy was born in a hospital in Sao Paulo, and although Bruno paid all the medical bills, he wanted no involvement with the baby. He did not meet the child until the boy was 4 months old. Eliza wanted the baby to have his father's last name and suggested that Bruno confirm paternity through a DNA test. Bruno agreed. According to her messages, Bruno had agreed to accept his role as the child's father and provide financial support. He also offered to move into a new apartment that he would pay for himself. Since Bruno was willing to cooperate, Eliza wanted to drop her claims for paternity and child support, which she had not yet officially filed. However, on June 5, 2010, Sonia and Eliza's friends become worried when they cannot contact Eliza, which her mother found unusual, especially since Eliza had not mentioned the child. The police began searching for Eliza, and news of her disappearance quickly spread to the media. Consequently, Bruno was questioned. He claimed to know Eliza but insisted he was not the father of her child, stating that it was just a brief relationship. Although the police had no evidence linking Bruno to Eliza's disappearance, many people suspected he knew more than he was letting on. On June 24, a key lead emerged when an anonymous caller informed the police that Eliza had been murdered, her clothes burned, and her body concealed on Bruno's property. However, the police struggled to secure a search warrant for Bruno's farm or home. The judge required more substantial evidence, particularly because Bruno was a prominent figure in Brazil. To protect their credibility in case he turned out to be innocent, the police proceeded with caution to avoid provoking public outrage. They placed a surveillance device in Bruno's house on June 26, 2010. Just 2 days after the wiretap was installed, Eliza's son was found in a slum in Ribeirão das Neves. Diane de Souza, Bruno's wife, is suspected of having abandoned the boy there. The police decided to interrogate Bruno and his wife, but the session yielded no useful information as they were supported by a team of lawyers. On June 28, after the police questioned Diane and Bruno, who refused to comment, a judge authorized a search of one of Bruno's homes. During the search, police found women's clothing and diapers in the house and in Bruno's Range Rover, where they also discovered blood traces that matched Eliza's DNA. Additionally, they found Eliza's sunglasses and black high-heeled shoes, which her friends quickly identified. Although the police collected substantial evidence linking Bruno to Eliza's disappearance, the judge deemed it insufficient, and the case did not advance. On July 6, another significant breakthrough occurred. Police arrested a 17-year-old named Sergio Rosa Sales, who was Bruno's cousin. Sergio shared a shocking story with the police, confessing that he was involved in Eliza's murder, which Bruno had orchestrated from beginning to end. Sergio claimed he was with Bruno's best friend and another man, a hitman, during the incident. According to him, Bruno wanted to eliminate Eliza because he felt she was putting too much pressure on him and feared she would leak damaging information to the press that could jeopardize his career. Sergio provided a detailed account of events, explaining that Bruno had invited Eliza to one of his homes to discuss financial matters regarding their child. Since Eliza had no transportation, Bruno arranged for his best friend, Luiz Henrique Romao, to drive her. However, Luiz's true intention was not to take her to meet Bruno, but rather to kidnap and kill her in order to avoid paying child support and to protect Bruno's reputation. In the car were Eliza, the child, Louise, and Sergio, who was armed with a weapon. Sergio attacked Eliza, but she managed to knock the weapon away. Although he tried to shoot her, the weapon was unloaded because it was only meant to intimidate her. At that moment, Sergio hit her several times until she lost consciousness. They then took the child to Bruno's house, where he was waiting. Bruno instructed them to deal with her without leaving any evidence, specifically stating that they should not harm the child. Bruno then directed Louise and Sergio to another piece of land where a man named Marcos Aparecido dos Santos, a former police officer turned murderer, was waiting. Marcos specialized in disposing of bodies and was known for his ability to eliminate any evidence of his crimes. After giving these orders, Bruno flew to Rio de Janeiro. Eliza was taken to the location where Sergio was present with her. Meanwhile, Marcos spent a long time with Eliza, using harsh and brutal methods. It's unclear how many days she endured suffering before her death. According to Sergio, on June 8, Eliza was forced to call her friends and tell them that everything was fine with Bruno, who had acknowledged paternity and would meet her demands. She was also made to say that she was leaving the country, but none of her friends or family received such calls. Eliza's lawyer stated that her last communication with family or friends was on June 4. Additionally, one theory from the police suggests that Bruno was present that day and wanted to witness Eliza's death. Sergio reported that after enduring many hours of torture, Eliza began begging for her life, at which point Marcos strangled her with a tie. After that, Marcos dismembered Eliza's body and placed the pieces in a black bag, feeding the flesh to the dogs. And after the dogs started eating, he disposed of the rest of Eliza's body elsewhere. However, the police discovered inconsistencies in Sergio's story. He claimed that Eliza's remains were buried where Bruno had originally brought her, but the police found no bones at that location. It is possible that the men agreed to conceal the actual location of her remains. Following Sergio's confession, the judge approved the arrest of Bruno and the other individuals involved in the murder. On July 7, police visited Bruno's house but found he was not there. A few hours later, Bruno and Louise voluntarily went to the police station to surrender, acting on the advice of Bruno's lawyers, who believed it would be better for his public image. Bruno maintained his innocence and denied any involvement in the murder. At the moment of his arrest, Bruno was not removed from his football team until details were clarified. But since the case dragged on July 15, his contract was terminated. The trial of Bruno, a famous footballer, attracted significant attention. Details shared by Sergio made headlines in newspapers and magazines, and the Brazilian public closely followed the case on television. They wanted to know if the police would find Eliza's remains and whether the public's favorite footballer had really committed something so terrible. During the trial, Eliza's mother, Sonia, sought custody of Eliza's son. Initially, custody was awarded to Eliza's father, Luis Carlos Samurio, as he was the last person with whom the child lived. However, Sonia quickly appealed to the court for custody of the child, wanting to ensure that her grandson did not grow up in the same terrible conditions she had experienced. The judge quickly removed guardianship from Luis Carlos due to his prior involvement in the molestation of a 10-year-old girl. As a result, the boy's grandmother, Sonia, became the official guardian. She then requested a paternity test, which revealed that Bruno Fernandes was the father of Eliza's son. Sergio was a crucial witness in the case. When he was 17, the judge ruled him innocent. However, in August 22, 2012, Sergio was found dead in an incident in the Minaslandia neighborhood of Belo Horizonte. According to police, Sergio was on his way to work when he was chased by two men on a motorbike. He tried to hide in a house, but was attacked 6 times. This meant that the police could no longer rely on their primary witness. 24 November 2012, Luis Henrique Ferreira Romao was sentenced to 15 years in prison for aggravated murder. and Fernanda Gomez de Castro, goalkeeper Bruno's ex-girlfriend, to 5 years for her part in the crime. On December 31, 2012, Bruno's contract with Flamengo officially ended. April 27, 2013, Marcos Aparecido dos Santos was sentenced to 22 years in prison. The sentence was 19 years in closed prison for murder and an additional 3 years in open prison for concealing a corpse. Bruno was sentenced to 22 years in prison, but he secured his release in 2017 after submitting another appeal. Just 4 days after his release, he joined a new football club called Bow Sport. He played his first match for the team on April 8, 2017, but the club lost all its sponsors due to his inclusion. On April 25, his appeal was overturned and he was ordered to serve his full sentence. Bruno and his lawyers argued that there was insufficient evidence to connect him to Eliza's disappearance. A new judge determined that blood traces found in Bruno's car were enough to keep him in prison. The judge also stated that if Bruno wanted a reduction in his sentence, he would need to reveal the location of Eliza's remains. Despite this, Bruno maintained his innocence. In 2019, his lawyer successfully arranged for him to enter a semi-open prison regime, allowing him to be out during the day and return at night. He later joined another football club, Pocos de Caldas, but after a few games, they terminated his contract due to his limited availability for training. Currently, Bruno is still in the semi-open regime and is searching for another football club that will accept him. The whereabouts of Eliza's remains are still unknown. Bruno continues to claim that he is innocent. He has divorced his wife and remarried dentist Ingrid Calheiros. His second wedding took place in prison. He leads a nearly normal life. He has a wife, spends considerable time outside of prison, and is able to work, while Sonia, the victim's mother, continues to search for her daughter's remains and raise her grandson. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Laura Salmon. On May 31, 1984, an elderly farmer named Johnny Muckle came to the Rutherford County Sheriff's Office. He reported that he had been driving through his field and noticed something unusual. As he got closer, he discovered a girl lying dead in the field, her face covered in blood. Alarmed, he immediately contacted the police without disturbing the scene. Several officers, including the sheriff, accompanied him back to the scene where they found the body of a blonde girl. She was wearing only her bra, as the rest of her clothing had been removed. The perpetrator had covered her with 2 pairs of jeans, one for women and one for men, and wrapped a black jacket around her upper body, with one sleeve tied tightly around her neck. The police found the entire scene unusual. They had never encountered anything like it in their many years of service. The autopsy revealed that the victim was clutching her underwear in her right hand, and her jeans were identified as part of her clothing. She had suffered multiple injuries, the most serious of which was to her head. Interestingly, Johnny reported that the girl's body was discovered near an abandoned quarry. This location is known to attract students from nearby educational institutions who often gather there to drink and socialize. It is possible that one of these gatherings ended in a violent incident, which is currently under investigation. While this information guides the investigation, it also expands the list of potential suspects to hundreds of juveniles. In order to focus on more specific suspects, additional data collection and analysis are required. The victim was identified as Laura Salmon, 18, a freshman at Middle Tennessee State University located in her hometown of Murfreesboro. Laura attended Oakland High School, where her mother, Lorene Mackey, taught English. Her parents were divorced at the time. Just days before the incident, Laura had moved in with her father because the school year had ended. She missed him and was going to spend part of the holiday with him. Laura was a kind, attractive, and sociable girl who enjoyed attending lively gatherings. As a young woman, she was crowned Little Miss Murfreesboro and showcased her acting talents in summer plays at the local theater. Laura was also very intelligent, graduating with honors and planning to continue her studies at college to build a solid career. She had started attending the local university in the fall of 1983, just 6 months before the tragic incident. She had just started a relationship with her boyfriend, David Kyle Gilly. Laura was well-liked and had no enemies who wanted to harm her. Police believed she may have been a random murder victim. An autopsy was completed on June 2, 1984. The forensic expert found at least 2 blunt force injuries to her head, likely caused by a rock or similar object. These blows resulted in brain damage. Laura suffered fatal head injuries from the repeated attacks. She lost consciousness and died within 10 minutes, and even immediate medical attention could not save her. Initially, there were concerns about the possibility that Laura had been abused, but the forensic results found no signs of this. However, the expert pointed out that Laura had been consensual in her intimate relations within 24 to 48 hours before the incident. It is believed that she may have had a boyfriend. It is possible the attacker staged the crime scene to mislead the police. Forensic teams collected samples from the clothing covering her body for further analysis. Additionally, tire tracks found in the area could belong to either Laura's car or the attacker's car, prompting the police to examine Laura's vehicle. One of the officers knew Laura. She worked as a cashier at a grocery store he frequented after work. He recognized her car and decided to check the store's parking lot. On June 3, he found Laura's car abandoned in the lot, which was subsequently taken to the lab for examination. When the forensic team examined the interior, they found no fingerprints, not even Laura's. This was unusual, indicating that the car may have been thoroughly cleaned, possibly by the perpetrator. However, they did find dirt in the wheel wells and some hairs of unknown origin under the floor mat. These samples were collected for analysis. The soil found in the wheel wells matched the particles on the floor mats of the driver and passenger areas, and when compared to the materials found at the crime scene, they matched as well. Evidence clearly showed that the tire tracks near the crime scene belonged to Laura's car, suggesting that the killer was not a random stranger, but someone who knew her well, including her workplace. As police gathered and analyzed the information, they interviewed people close to Laura, starting with her mother, Lorene Mackey. Lorene immediately suspected her daughter's boyfriend, David, because she was aware of the toxic nature of their relationship and had never supported it. She described David as jealous and possessive, almost like a stalker. Lorene noted that many of Laura's encounters with David ended in arguments. This was extremely distressing to her, as she felt her daughter was ignoring important warning signs. Despite the efforts of several family members, including Laura's father, they were unable to convince Laura that David was a danger. Tragically, this may have contributed to Laura's early death. At that time, personal relationship issues were not considered matters for the police to handle. People generally believed that they should resolve such matters themselves. The police spoke with Lorene's mother and then met with her father and stepmother. Lorene stated that she had last spoken to Laura on the morning of May 31, just a few days before the body was discovered. On that day, Laura had slept over at her friend Trina's house, and they were together until late at night. On the morning of June 1, the girls slept in and woke up around 9 a.m. They then left. Laura went to work at the store, where she was scheduled to work until lunchtime. Trina was supposed to replace her at 2 p.m., after which Laura planned to check her semester grades and then go swimming at her grandmother's pool. However, when Trina arrived at the store around 1 p.m., she discovered that Laura was not there. Her coworkers said that Laura had taken time off and left early. Laura was wearing the same jeans that were found on her body. Laura's car was discovered at work at 3:30 p.m., which was unusual since she was not there. It is unclear when she arrived because there were no surveillance cameras at that time. Laura's father, Salmon, last saw his daughter and confirmed that she was with her friend Trina that day. The two girls had been friends since childhood and worked together at the grocery store. Trina helped piece together the events of May 31 and supported Laura's family's concerns. She knew that Laura was afraid of her boyfriend David because he was harassing her, making him a suspect in Laura's murder. Laura had begun talking to other guys because she wanted to break up with David, but was too afraid to tell him directly. She tried to avoid him to signal that their relationship was over. Laura often expressed feeling unsafe around her ex-boyfriend, who was violent towards her, and her fears were well-founded. David Kyle Gillies' behavior became increasingly cruel, making the situation unacceptable. Several co-workers at the grocery store confirmed that Laura and David had a very bad relationship. Witnesses reported that David would come to the store to accuse Laura of cheating and harass her. He used harsh words and even resorted to hitting Laura. David was very possessive. When questioned at the police station, he claimed that Laura was swimming with her grandmother and that he had not seen her. He did not mention their previous encounter before the incident. Witnesses reported seeing Laura with a man in her car that day. After they left together, Laura's car reappeared in the parking lot, but she was missing. No one saw her arrive or park, suggesting that the killer may have left the car there. The police had no evidence against David, so they released him. Unfortunately, the conversation with him was not recorded. A week later, David was questioned again, this time about the last day he spent with Laura. David said that they had a good time on May 30 and that they had not argued. They left Laura's grandmother's apartment at around 9 p.m. in his car, parked behind a church, and were intimate. He then drove her back to her grandmother's house, and they left at around 2 a.m. in separate cars. David went to work, believing that Laura had returned to her father's house. He left work at 7 a.m. and went straight to bed, waking up at 3 p.m. He claimed that he was home during the murder, and his father supported his alibi. The next interview took place in July. David added to his previous claim that after they were intimate, they used jeans in his car to clean up. This detail seemed odd, and the inconsistencies in his testimony raised suspicions, but there was still no evidence against him. The police worked to piece together a timeline of events leading up to the murder. They discovered that on May 30, Laura had been dancing with a man at a nightclub. It was later revealed that the man was one of Laura's friends and that he had a verified alibi for the time of the murder. A new suspect emerged when a Nashville woman reported being abused. During the attack, the attacker mentioned a woman named Laura, threatening to hurt her like he did Laura if she resisted or reported him. During the investigation, police discovered that the suspect also attended the same college as Laura, frequented the gym where she worked out, and often saw her at campus parties. He was also near the school on the day of the murder. Police compared hair found in Laura's car to that of the new suspect. However, DNA analysis at the time was insufficient to make a definitive match. The new suspect was eventually ruled out because the hair samples found in Laura's car did not match him, and he had a solid alibi. As the investigation continued to stall, Laura's parents grew increasingly concerned that the search for the killer might be stalled as well. Concerns about the investigation were confirmed over time due to several police errors. The crime scene was not properly secured, and police collected evidence without using gloves, which could have contaminated it. When Laura's father arrived at the area where his daughter's body was found, he noticed her necklace, which the police had overlooked. He took it to the police station, further cementing his belief that the police had been careless in their investigation. Sadly, Laura's family was right. It took 16 years for the investigation to progress. The case became one of many unsolved cold cases. It wasn't until 2000 that a police team was formed to reinvestigate Laura's case and finally identify her killer. For police officer Dan Goodwin, it was a personal matter because he knew Laura. They had been in college together and had gone to the movies with friends just 4 days before her death. During his first meeting with Laura's family, Goodwin promised to uncover the truth behind her death. Eventually, the police gained access to advanced technology that allowed them to re-examine old evidence. They sent the clothing found on Laura's body to a lab to create a DNA profile. While reviewing Laura's file, the the police found a note that contradicted the alibi of Laura's ex-boyfriend, David Kyle Gilley, who claimed he was home at the time of Laura's murder. It was discovered that the police had a witness who contradicted David's alibi. During this time, David's stepfather insisted that he was home, but a woman reported seeing him in a car near the field where Laura's body was found. The woman was located and re-interrogated, confirming her previous account from years earlier and providing the police with fairly accurate details. She stated that the young man she saw driving Laura's car that day had a blank expression on his face and closely resembled the photo of David that had appeared in the newspaper at the time of the murder. In the new investigation, police spoke to Laura's friends, who described David's anxious behavior after the incident. They noted that he appeared to have no remorse for Laura's death and even spoke arrogantly about her. A new witness revealed that at a party, David confessed to her that he had committed the murder during a private conversation. He had threatened her and expressed a desire to attack her, warning that he would harm her if she did not comply. Fortunately, another friend intervened and scared David away. Meanwhile, forensic experts tested the evidence on the clothing and discovered that the blood was Laura's. The only remaining question was about the semen found on the jeans. They needed a biological sample from David for comparison. Unfortunately, he had moved away, so the police began looking for him. David had relocated to Florida in 1986. He was twice divorced, had a daughter, and worked for the Department of Public Works. David also had a criminal record that included abuse, attempted burglary, and resisting arrest, fitting the profile of someone who might have harmed Laura. After meeting with the police, David significantly changed his story. He denied being intimate with Laura the day before the murder and claimed that he had never been jealous or used physical violence. The police obtained a warrant for David's arrest, allowing them to collect all the necessary documents for DNA analysis and comparison with the evidence. On May 31, 2000, laboratory tests confirmed that the blood on David's jeans belonged to both Laura and him. It was likely that he had been wearing the jeans during the crime, as both Laura's and his blood were found on the fabric. The police had suspected David from the beginning of the investigation, and it took months of additional testing to confirm their theories. Unfortunately, it took 17 years to officially prove his guilt. In November 2001, David attended another interview where he contradicted his previous statements. He claimed that he had never had a serious relationship with Laura, describing their interactions as light flirting. He asserted that he had never affected her emotionally or physically, was not jealous, and did not control her actions. This was in direct contradiction to the accounts of many witnesses who disagreed with him. His only admission was that the jeans found on Laura's body were likely his, but he claimed that he had accidentally left them there. These inconsistencies in his testimony provided enough evidence to charge him. By the time the interview ended, David realized he was in trouble and asked for a lawyer. He was arrested on the night of November 14, 2001, and charged with first-degree murder. After the murder, procedural issues arose because David was under 18 at the time of the crime. His case, which involved an adult, was transferred to juvenile court. In 2002, preliminary hearings were held to decide whether the case should be transferred to adult district court. On February 1, 2002, it was finally decided that he would be tried as an adult. During the next preliminary hearing, challenges arose regarding the selection of witnesses for both the prosecution and the defense. The prosecutor's office wanted several of Laura's friends, as well as her mother, to testify before the grand jury. After lengthy discussions, the witness list was finalized. The trial began 22 years after Laura Salmon's death. On August 26, 2006, David Kyle Gilley had been in prison for 5 years awaiting trial. Multiple witnesses testified, revealing the extent of the cruelty he had shown toward Laura throughout their relationship. Disturbing incidents were recounted. Several witnesses reported hearing David make threats out of jealousy. He assaulted Laura, causing her injuries, including a broken nose, and even threatened the dormitory manager at her college. On one occasion, after a heated argument, he nearly threw Laura down a flight of stairs, but the presence of witnesses may have prevented him from causing serious injury. In high school, classmates witnessed David's abusive behavior toward Laura. He assaulted her by slamming her head into a metal cabinet, pushing her against a wall, and slapping her. When Laura expressed a desire to break up, David locked her in a cabinet and banged on the door from the outside. Others heard him threaten to kill her if they broke up. One evening, while playing near the quarry where Laura was later found, friends saw David break her nose by slamming her face into the hood of a car. One of Laura's friends reported the abuse to the police, but there was no record of any law enforcement action taken. Laura felt her complaint was ignored, even when she went to the police station with a broken nose. Laura wanted to end her relationship with David, but he sent her letters threatening to kill her if she tried. He was extremely possessive, believing that if she was not his, she did not deserve to live. Laura's mother did not know the full extent of David's cruelty, but tried to persuade her daughter to break up with him, feeling that their relationship was unhealthy. She suspected that jealousy may have been the motive behind the eventual murder. Laura was a year older than David, and he became increasingly jealous as she started college and moved to a school where she made new friends and socialized with other boys. The prosecutor's office reported that David was with Laura on the day of the attack, while she was on her way to her grandmother's house to swim. The attacker intended to lure her to a remote area to punish her for seeing another boy. There, they got into a fight, during which David wrestled her to the ground and pinned her down, using his body to restrain her. He then began hitting her on the head with whatever object he could find, which unfortunately included several large stones, causing the young girl to suffer serious injuries and die. In response, the defense argued that the genes found on Laura contained DNA from David, Laura, and an unidentified person, suggesting that David may have been framed. The attorney emphasized that David had criticized the police for bias during the investigation. David's brother testified on his behalf, providing a strong alibi. During cross-examination, police discovered that David's brother had been in contact with David while he was in prison. The brothers discussed ways to get David released, leading to the creation of an elaborate alibi that was exposed at the hearing. David Kyle Gilley was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 30 years. He is currently incarcerated, and his defense attorneys have filed multiple appeals against the verdict, all of which have been rejected. Initially, the murder of Laura Salmon did not attract significant public attention. 4 months after the horrific incident, the tragedy was widely reported in the media. The case sparked a national discussion about domestic violence. Since 1984, various measures have been taken to strengthen protections for women facing violence in their relationships. Hello everyone. Today we will learn about another case, the case of Joanna Yates. Joanna Yates was born on April 19, 1985, in the United Kingdom. Her friends and family called her Jo. She was the younger of 2 children, with an older brother. Joanna enjoyed a happy childhood in a loving home, as her parents were relatively wealthy and sent her to a private school. After graduating, she attended the Peter Simons College, where she studied landscape design and earned a diploma. This education helped her become a skilled professional in a field she had always dreamed of working in. By the end of 2010, at 25 years old, Joanna was thriving in her career. During this period, she was in a relationship with Greg Reardon, who was 27. Greg and Joanna had met in December 2008. Both Joanna and Greg were dedicated young professionals who prioritized achieving financial stability before considering marriage and children. In October 2010, Joanna received a job offer that marked a turning point in her life. With her solid professional qualifications, she was hired as a landscape designer at a promising company in Bristol. Everything seemed to align perfectly, allowing her to begin building her future. They started renting a ground-floor apartment in a private house in the city that same month. They quickly focused on their work. Joanna was known for her positivity, cheerfulness, and energy. With Christmas approaching, they excitedly prepared to celebrate in their new home. They decorated their apartment and bought gifts for their families, looking forward to the holiday. However, no one could have anticipated that this year's celebration would be marred by unexpected events. On the evening of December 17, 2010, Joanna was enjoying a drink with friends. Around 8 p.m., she left the pub to go home. She walked through the city center and stopped at a supermarket but didn't find anything she liked. So she went to another store where she bought 2 bottles of cider. After that, she entered Tesco Express and purchased a pizza. With her essentials in hand, Joanna headed to her apartment, arriving at 8:50 p.m. Once home, she turned on the oven to reheat the pizza while texting several colleagues about her evening plans. According to her colleagues, Joanna planned to spend the rest of the day alone since Greg was away for the entire weekend visiting relatives in another city. She shared with them her feelings of sadness about being alone, mentioned that she would keep herself busy with Christmas preparations, and planned to bake pies to share with her colleagues after the weekend. Greg returned home on Sunday afternoon, December 19, expecting to see Joanna, but she was not there. He found her handbag, keys, and other belongings that she usually kept at home. He also discovered her winter coat. When he called her, he only found her phone lying in the living room, which worried him the most because Joanna had left without her mobile phone. According to all information, Joanna should have been at home and not at work. Even if she had gone shopping or visiting someone, it was strange that she left without her coat, phone, and keys. Something didn't add up. He noticed that the cat hadn't been fed for a long time. It was clearly very hungry and practically lunged at the food. Greg suddenly realized that something must have happened to his girlfriend during the 2 days he had spent in another city. While he was away, Greg had repeatedly called and texted Joanna, but she ignored him. At first, he thought it might be due to network problem, but now he knows things are not that simple. He remembered that 2 days ago, Joanna was supposed to go to the pub with her colleagues. And since then, he hadn't heard from her. He reached out to her parents, friends, and colleagues, but no one knew where she was. That night, feeling frustrated and worried, Greg decided to go to the police station to report his girlfriend missing. Given the time that had passed, the police took the situation very seriously and quickly considered the possibility of abduction. They searched Joanna and Greg's apartment, but found no signs of violence or forced entry. It seemed that Joanna knew her abductor and had let him in willingly. It was likely that she had been attacked in the apartment. During the investigation, they found a receipt showing that Joanna had purchased pizza and 2 bottles of cider on the evening of December 17. One of the cider bottles was open, suggesting she had taken a few sips before something occurred. However, neither the pizza box nor the food itself was found. If Joanna had been attacked immediately with the intent to abduct her, or something worse, it was improbable that she would have had time to eat an entire pizza and throw away the box. Joanna had clearly gone missing, and it was concerning that she hadn't opened her advent calendar on December 17 and 18, even though she had been doing so every evening prior. On December 21, her boyfriend and family appeared on television, pleading for anyone with information about Joanna to come forward. Following this, news of her disappearance spread rapidly across the country. During this time, authorities focused on Joanna's close circle, particularly her boyfriend Greg, who had been away and could have used that as an alibi. However, he quickly proved he was with relatives in another city, clearing him as a suspect. Additionally, all signs indicated that their relationship was healthy, with no apparent motive for anyone to harm her. The police interviewed the tenants living on the first floor, which had 2 rented apartments, while the landlord lived on the second floor. They also questioned the landlord, who insisted he had not heard anything that evening and had not seen Joanna. The tenants on the first floor were a couple, Vincent Tobac, an engineer, and his girlfriend Tanya, an analyst. They were a respectable couple planning to marry soon. They mentioned that they did not know their neighbors well since they had only recently moved in and had not met them yet. On the night in question, Tanya was attending a corporate party, and Vincent picked her up at 2 a.m. He did not notice anything unusual that night. They had hosted a loud party on December 1 with music and heavy conversation. During the evening, they heard some loud female screams, but all the young partygoers were drunk and did not pay much attention. As the sounds quickly faded, it was unclear where they originated. However, they now thought those screams might be connected to their missing neighbor. At first, everyone was hopeful that Joanna would come home safely. However, as the days went by, their confidence began to fade. On December 25, 2010, a young couple was walking their dogs about 5 kilometers from Joanna's apartment in a remote area on the city's outskirts. They noticed something unusual sticking out from the snow by the roadside and thought it looked like clothing. Curious, they decided to investigate further and uncovered the body of a girl. They immediately contacted the police, and it was quickly confirmed that the deceased was 25-year-old Joanna, who had been missing since that weekend. Heavy snowfall had covered her body, which is why it had remained undiscovered for a week. Forensic experts who examined the scene quickly observed that the body was not only covered in snow, but also intentionally concealed under leaves and branches. This suggested that Joanna was not just a random victim of an accident. It appeared she had been deliberately hidden there. She was found wearing the same clothes she had on Friday evening, except for her coat, which was left in her apartment. Her t-shirt was raised, exposing her right breast, which could be related to the motive behind the attack. Although she was wearing warm socks, one sock was missing and could not be located. The police speculated that the absence of the sock might indicate that the killer took it as a trophy, a behavior sometimes seen in maniacs and serial offenders. A forensic examination revealed that the cause of death was asphyxiation. In addition to neck injuries, 43 other wounds were found on her body, including abrasions, deep scratches, and bruises from blunt force trauma. This evidence indicated that the victim had fought desperately for her life. Because she was discovered in the snow during cold weather, her body had not decomposed and remained in good condition. Notably, Joanna was found lying in a fetal position, suggesting that she had been intentionally placed there. The examination also showed that she had not eaten the pizza, indicating that she was attacked before she had the chance to do so. Interestingly, just a meter away from her body, blood was found on a concrete barrier, which was identified as belonging to Joanna. It appears that the killer initially intended to move her body over the barrier, but was unable to do so for some reason. This suggests that Joanna was killed in one location and that an attempt was made to hide her elsewhere. It also seemed that the perpetrator or perpetrators were startled and had to flee quickly. During the examination of Joanna's clothing, traces of semen from a man, likely the attacker, were discovered on her jeans, particularly near the zipper, indicating an abuse assault. As it became evident that the crime was particularly brutal, a large-scale operation was launched to locate the suspect. This investigation was set to be one of the largest ever undertaken by the police in this part of the UK, involving around 60 officers. They reached out to the public for assistance, initially offering a reward of £10,000 for information leading to the capture of the suspect, which was later raised to £60,000. Joanna's friends created a website and used social media to support the investigation. Meanwhile, detectives focused on examining Joanna's immediate social circle, looking for any potential enemies. Described as non-confrontational and mild-mannered, she had no known conflicts with anyone. The investigators gathered video footage from surveillance cameras located on the Clifton Suspension Bridge, which Joanna crossed on her way home from the pub, where she was last seen alive. Upon reviewing the footage, they found it to be of poor quality, yielding no suspicious activity. The detectives also considered the possibility that the suspect might have taken a different route over another bridge across the River Avon, situated a kilometer from Joanna's home, which could have avoided detection by the cameras. However, this theory remained unconfirmed. A man named Christopher Jeffries was the landlord of the apartment rented by Joanna. He had previously been a teacher but retired and now made his living from rental properties. People described him as quiet, very intelligent, and somewhat eccentric. Before these events, no one suspected he could be involved in anything serious. His unusual behavior was never perceived as a threat. The police spoke to Christopher again about the night of December 17. He stated that he went to the gym to work out that evening and returned to his apartment around 9 p.m., not leaving again afterward. This timing matched when Joanna was believed to have come home. Christopher insisted that he did not see or hear anything suspicious that night and did not hear any of the female screams reported by party attendees. His alibi was weak because he lived alone, with no one to support his claim. However, concerns grew due to the inconsistencies in his story when he spoke with detectives again. He suddenly mentioned seeing a few unfamiliar young men near Joanna's home just before her return, describing them as suspicious. He could not see them clearly, and this addition to his story was met with great skepticism. Joanna's landlord became the primary suspect. Distrust intensified when Greg informed the police that Mr. Christopher had helped him jump-start his car on the morning of December 17, just before he left town. Greg clearly recalled saying he was leaving for the weekend and was worried about his girlfriend being alone. Naturally, a perpetrator might have seen this as a convenient opportunity to attack. The police had not yet confirmed their suspicions, but somehow journalists discovered that Christopher Jeffries was the main suspect. Reporters began to chase him in the streets, forcing Christopher to stay home almost all the time to avoid them. The situation deteriorated further when various rumors about him started appearing in the newspapers. He expressed that he was close to a nervous breakdown and felt unsafe. Whenever he went outside, he was openly called a criminal, with fabricated stories about child abuse during his teaching career. On December 30, 2010, the police arrested Christopher and subjected him to harsh interrogation. Despite this, he firmly maintained that he had no involvement in the murder. At that point, authorities did not have enough evidence to charge him in court. However, later, Vincent, another tenant living in Mr. Christopher's house, came to the police station. He suddenly remembered that on the night of the incident, he had left the house twice and saw the landlord's car parked in the driveway both times, first in the early evening and again later when he went out to find his girlfriend. Vincent noted that the car was facing the opposite direction the second time, suggesting it had been driven somewhere that night, which contradicted Christopher's claim that he hadn't gone anywhere. During the search of Christopher's apartment, police discovered a pair of sneakers with small stains that looked like blood. These items were sent to the lab for testing, but the analysis would take time. Under UK law, police can only hold a suspect for 24 hours if there is not enough evidence to make an arrest. After one day, they must either release the suspect or go to court to request more time for custody. In this case, the police chose to extend Christopher's detention because they needed more time to analyze the evidence and formally document witness Vincent's statement. Despite the extension, the police could not establish Christopher's involvement in the crime. The stains on the sneakers were too small to obtain a DNA profile with the technology available at that time. After testing, the lab returned the sneakers, stating that it was impossible to extract DNA or determine the source of the stains. Even so, this did not lead to Christopher's release. The male DNA found on Joanna's body and clothing did not match his profile. On January 1, 2011, during a holiday, Christopher was released without charges, which was a relief for him. However, the media continued to pursue him. The investigation had a promising lead in Vincent Tobac, who altered information in his testimony. He had no alibi at the time of the crime, making him a new suspect. The police believed he might have tried to frame the landlord in an attempt to mislead the investigation. Suspicion towards Vincent grew stronger after he called the police station to explain how Christopher's car had moved while he was in the Netherlands. It was puzzling why Vincent hadn't mentioned this detail earlier. To obtain an official statement from him, several police officers visited him on December 31, 2010. During the questioning, they noticed that Vincent acted strangely. He was vague in some parts of his story, but gave very detailed answers in others, almost as if he had rehearsed them. These inconsistencies raised red flags for the experienced officers, who noticed that he was carefully considering his answers and managing the information he shared. The most suspicious detail was the unexplained scratches on his hands. He insisted he didn't know Joanna at all, claiming he had only moved into the apartment a week before the incident. When asked to provide fingerprints and DNA samples, he hesitated and explained that he had been in the neighboring apartment with the landlord while Joanna was away, which might have accidentally left his DNA. Vincent took a long time to agree to provide the samples for comparison. His profile showed a partial match with the DNA found on the body of Joanna, but there was a significant issue. A quality DNA sample from Joanna could not be obtained because she had been lying by the roadside in the snow for a week, which exposed her body to the elements. As a result, the samples were badly damaged and contaminated, meaning that even a partial match with Vincent could not definitively prove he was the murderer. Nonetheless, this information raised serious suspicions in the police investigation, prompting the authorities to investigate Vincent's background more thoroughly. Vincent Tobac was born on February 10, 1978. At the time of Joanna's murder, he was 32 years old. He was originally from the Netherlands and was the youngest of 5 children. As a child, Vincent was quiet and shy, more introverted than many of his peers, but he was also very intelligent and ambitious. In 2003, he graduated from a technological university in the Netherlands with a master's degree in landscape design, a field he shared with Joanna and hoped to pursue further. In 2007, Vincent moved to the United Kingdom and began working as an engineer. That same year, he met Tanya, and they later moved to Bristol, renting an apartment in the house of Christopher. The landlord had a positive impression of him, as Vincent was calm, friendly, and had no criminal record, which convinced Christopher to provide him with housing. On January 20, 2011, 32-year-old Vincent Tobac was arrested on suspicion of murder. He consistently denied his guilt and maintained his original story. However, during multiple meetings with detectives, he repeatedly changed his statements, adding new details. Initially, he claimed he had stayed home that evening until leaving to pick up his girlfriend Tanya at 2 a.m. Later, he claimed that he had actually left the house twice that night to take photographs and go to the supermarket. Vincent was insistent only in his statement that he did not kill Joanna. It became clear that he was lying and trying to evade responsibility. The police identified the car Vincent was driving and scrutinized footage from street surveillance cameras to track the routes the murderer might have taken when disposing of the victim. Detectives were not surprised to find Vincent's car appearing along nearly the entire route. The car was seized and examined. Numerous pink fibers, matching those found on Joanna's clothing, were discovered in the trunk. These fibers were mixed with fibers from Vincent's own clothing. The most significant evidence found by forensic specialists was blood stains in the trunk. Testing revealed that this blood also belonged to Joanna. It was clear that the perpetrator had attempted to clean the car of any evidence. There was a strong smell of cleaning products, but he had not done a thorough job. Detectives confiscated Vincent's laptop and mobile phone for examination. The analysis showed that his attack had been driven by abuse desire from the start. The laptop contained numerous images and videos, along with browser searches for depraved content. Vincent preferred methods such as strangulation and beatings, which aligned with how Joanna was murdered. He was also a regular visitor to escort websites and met escort in person, It came to light that Vincent was living a double life. He appeared to be a decent man and Tanya's fiancé, while privately, he harbored dark secrets. After the murder, a large number of search queries were discovered that revealed Vincent was looking for information about Joanna. He was closely monitoring the investigation, and detectives observed a troubling detail. After checking the progress regarding Joanna's death, Vincent seemed to take pleasure in reliving his actions. This behavior indicated that he could be a potential serial killer, likely to kill again once the thrill of his past victim faded. The investigation uncovered incriminating evidence, including searches related to murder and the decomposition of human bodies. On January 22, 2011, Vincent Tobac was charged with first-degree murder. Although he initially denied his involvement, he later confessed, but insisted that he never intended to kill Joanna. He claimed his actions were accidental and not premeditated. In October 2011, hearings commenced. However, the judge prohibited the prosecution from using the defendant's obsession with violent and abuse content as evidence. In court, Vincent chose to represent himself and delivered his final statement. He recounted that on the evening of December 17, 2010, he was alone in his apartment since his girlfriend had gone to a Christmas party with her colleagues. When he returned from the store, he noticed his neighbor, Joanna, waving at him from her window and inviting him inside. Once inside, Joanna offered him some cider. Vincent misinterpreted her welcoming gesture and believed it indicated a desire for intimacy, which led him to kiss her suddenly. Joanna reacted immediately by screaming and pushing him away. In a state of panic, Vincent covered her mouth and wrapped his hands around her neck in an attempt to silence her. He claimed he held his hand on her neck for about 20 seconds before realizing that Joanna was no longer alive. Vincent insisted that there was no abuse motive behind his actions, viewing it merely as a misunderstanding and a tragic accident. In court, the defendant pretended to feel remorse, but it seemed insincere. The prosecution argued that his version of events was just another lie, especially since it did not account for the 43 injuries the victim had sustained. Joanna even had a broken nose, which suggested a lengthy struggle and significant force. The prosecution believed that the 20 seconds of strangulation he described was far too short. They thought he had been observing her for a long time and intentionally entered her apartment that night when he knew she would be alone, likely after overhearing a conversation between Greg and Christopher. It appeared that Vincent had long-standing feelings for Joanna and knew her better than he let on. He had initially intended to abuse and kill her, as shown by his fetishes for strangling women. Being a strong young man, he easily overpowered Joanna, who was 30 centimeters shorter than him, and he used his full weight against her during the struggle. She sustained injuries to her head, neck, torso, and arms, indicating that the fight was drawn out and her death was slow and painful. He continued to put himself in a compromising situation after the crime by taking the victim's pizza. This is the only reason why neither the pizza box nor its contents were found, even though the receipt was found in the apartment. It's possible that blood or his fingerprints were on the box, prompting him to throw it away along with the food. At 9:25 p.m., Vincent texted his girlfriend Tanya, claiming he was bored at home without her. This was an obvious attempt to create an alibi while he was far from bored at that moment. After sending the message, Vincent loaded the victim's body into his car trunk, stopped at a store to buy beer and chips, and then drove to a different location to dispose of the body. The prosecution reiterated to the jury that Vincent Tobac was a dangerous criminal who could not be trusted. On October 26, 2011, during the closing arguments, the jury began their deliberations, which lasted for 2 full days. On October 28, they returned with a verdict, finding Vincent Tobac guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum term of 20 years. However, his legal troubles did not end there. In March 2015, he was charged with possessing child abuse, with 145 illegal images found on his laptop He pleaded guilty once more and received an additional 10-month sentence. Following Vincent's conviction, Christopher Jeffries sought justice for the damages he had incurred. He filed defamation claims against several newspapers for harming his reputation. These publications, which had published 8 articles about the case, eventually apologized to Christopher. As a result, they were ordered to pay significant financial compensation for the reputational and moral damages caused. In 2014, ITV releasing a 2-part series titled The Lost Honor of Christopher Jeffries. This series focuses on the former teacher who was affected by the murder of a girl who had rented an apartment from him. Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Bianca Edmunds. Bianca Edmunds was the second of 4 children, with 2 brothers and 1 sister. When Bianca was young, her father took a job with a mining company, which kept him away from home for long periods. This created tension in the family, as her mother wanted him to spend more time with them, but he could not quit his job. This eventually led to their separation. Bianca's mother later remarried another man, who adopted Bianca and her siblings. As a result, Bianca was often referred to by her stepfather's surname, Edmunds. This did not bother the family or Edmunds much, as she had little contact with her biological father in her early years. However, as she grew older and finished school, she reconnected with her biological father, and they developed a close relationship. After completing her secondary education, Bianca joined the Australian Navy. Unfortunately, a year later, she injured her back during training, which led to her being discharged for health reasons. After recovering, she worked various jobs in the retail industry but found it difficult to hold down a permanent position. In 2007, she gave birth to her first son after starting a relationship with a man. However, the man was not interested in family life, and they eventually broke up. By this time, Bianca had matured and knew what she wanted in life. She longed for reliable support and a comfortable lifestyle. In early 2012, shortly after turning 26, she met Michael Capo Siena, who was 35. Their relationship progressed rapidly, and they got married that same year. At the end of 2012, Bianca became pregnant again, and on June 3, 2013, she gave birth to a son. Although their relationship progressed quickly, it was toxic from the start. Michael often complained that Bianca was too controlling. The couple argued frequently, and shortly after the birth of their son, they decided to divorce. In early 2015, Bianca met Glenn Cassidy, a 48-year-old man, through a dating app. As usual, Bianca acted quickly. She appreciated Glenn's gentle nature, which suited her desire to be proactive in the relationship. Their initial online flirtation quickly turned into a real-life meeting and intimacy. Although Glenn was 20 years older than Bianca and was married with 2 children from a previous marriage, their similar life experiences seemed to help them connect quickly. In February 2016, they got married. Meanwhile, Bianca faced a number of personal challenges, most notably a custody battle with her ex-husband, Michael. Bianca's second husband, Michael, was initially not very involved in their son's life and often refused to see him. However, things changed when Michael entered a new relationship, achieved financial stability, and decided to spend more time with his son, who was then 9 months old. In March 2014, Michael requested visitation rights for his son. This led to a number of disputes, with Bianca accusing her ex-husband of being toxic and unfit to be a father. Michael decided to file a lawsuit against Bianca. By August 2015, after several court hearings, he was granted visitation rights, but with strict restrictions. He could only see his son in a neutral location under supervision, with 2-hour visits in Melbourne, a 2-hour drive from where Michael lived. This arrangement caused significant inconvenience for Bianca. She was unhappy that Michael was still interfering in their son's life, and she wanted to sever the relationship but could not find a way to do so. Unfortunately, the situation did not improve. Michael decided to take legal action again, seeking to increase the time and frequency of his visitation with his son and to remove the supervision requirement. This frustrated Bianca even more, leading to numerous arguments that sometimes escalated into physical confrontations. Michael's girlfriend described Bianca as a toxic person who tried to limit Michael's communication with his son out of anger. She said that Michael had changed his mind and wanted to reconnect with the child, and that he was legally entitled to do so. Michael's girlfriend portrayed him as a devoted family man with a kind personality. On the other hand, Glenn, who was in a relationship with Bianca, viewed Michael as a toxic and cruel person who could pose a threat to his son. Bianca frequently expressed her concerns about Michael to Glenn, claiming that he had threatened to kidnap her son. Bianca also attempted to manipulate her son psychologically by telling him that Michael, his biological father, was a bad person, but this tactic did not have the desired effect. Instead, she began to manipulate Glenn, using him as her main tool. Tensions in the family escalated, largely due to Bianca's provocations. She refused to be intimate with her husband unless he agreed to the idea of her ex-husband Michael's death. Over time, their relationship deteriorated. Bianca began to pressure and belittle Glenn, calling him a coward for not dealing with Michael and for not helping her. Initially, Glenn took her words as a joke, but over time, he began to seriously consider killing Michael due to the constant pressure he faced when his wife suggested planning the action. Glenn had written a fairly basic list of important points by hand. He wanted to shoot his enemy and then find a way to dispose of the body. In addition, Glenn's notes were full of spelling errors, highlighting his difficulties with writing. Bianca had received support from her husband, and she prepared him to commit the crime. Glenn desperately wanted to have a child with her, and her manipulation regarding intimacy worked. The couple, who had difficulty conceiving, shared their struggles with their friends. Bianca cleverly convinced Glenn that after Michael died, he would definitely have an heir. After this plan was documented, they began to prepare and execute it step by step. They searched for the best location for an ambush and created a map of the area where Michael lived with his new girlfriend. Bianca's knowledge of the layout of Michael's house helped her create a detailed plan, including the locations of doors and windows. They were very thorough in their preparations. They even mapped out the locations of streetlights and nearby houses with barking dogs. Bianca was eager to proceed and urged that Michael be killed as soon as possible. However, each time they set a date, things went wrong, causing delays. Glenn visited Michael's house several times to assess the entrances and exits of various streets. During these visits, he would call Bianca to discuss any problems that were interfering with their plans. He often expressed frustration that Michael was not home at the scheduled time, as he seemed to be working late or socializing with friends. The attackers communicated in code and referred to the area around Michael's house as the workplace. Glenn often stayed late, waiting for the target of the attack. Despite Bianca's encouragement, Glenn remained anxious and uncertain. Bianca employed her main tactic, intimacy, assuring him that once Michael was dead, he would have everything he wanted. Later, for reasons unknown, the police obtained a recording of their conversation. In response, Glenn installed a call recording app on his cell phone, possibly suspecting that he was being manipulated and wanting to protect himself in case things went wrong. Regardless, this did not absolve him of guilt for the shooting that followed. While carrying out this heinous plan, Bianca was supposed to be on vacation with Glenn's mother. The destination was on the other side of Australia, likely chosen to provide Bianca with an alibi that would convince the police of her innocence. On March 11, 2016, she prepared for the trip and spoke to Glenn about their plans. The next day, March 12, Glenn drove 170 kilometers to Michael's house. At 12:23 p.m., he sent another text message, expressing his love for her and speaking angrily about Michael. Around 1 p.m. that same day, Glenn drove to the road leading to Michael's house. He reiterated his love for Bianca and his willingness to carry out his plan. During this time, Glenn set up an ambush, positioning himself to see the front door of the house. When Michael and Giovanna Silva, his girlfriend, arrived home, they settled in to watch a movie. At 7:18 p.m., Silvana looked out the window and saw a man get out of his car and walk toward their house empty-handed. Recognizing him, she told Michael, feeling confused. This was odd since they lived far from Bianca and her new husband, leaving them puzzled as to how he had gotten there. Glenn noticed some people walking by, then returned to his car, presumably to assess the area and collect his thoughts. At 7:27 p.m., he got out of his car again, this time carrying a large white bag. After checking around and confirming that no one was nearby, he approached Michael's front door at 7:30 p.m. Glenn knocked on the door, and his sudden appearance at such a late hour made Michael nervous. He went into the kitchen and grabbed a large knife for protection. Silvana opened the door slightly and kept it on the chain. A brief conversation ensued, in which Michael told Glenn that he could not help Glenn. Glenn then held out his hand as if to say goodbye, and Michael, thinking it was safe, shook his hand. This turned out to be a grave mistake. Glenn grabbed Michael's hand, forcing him into the house. A struggle broke out as Glenn attempted to pull out a handgun and aim it at Michael's head. Michael fought back violently with the knife, striking Glenn several times. Tragically, a shot rang out, killing Michael instantly. Glenn then pointed the gun at Silvana, apparently intending to eliminate her as a witness. However, he had only loaded one bullet into the gun, and when he pulled the trigger, the handgun clicked but did not fire. In a fit of rage, he struck Silvana with his gun, knocking her unconscious. Glenn may have intended to kill her, but after the first blow, he collapsed to the floor, bleeding heavily from a stab wound. By 9:32 p.m., the situation was over. Silvana regained consciousness and found both men dead. She called emergency services, reporting that she had been attacked and that her fiancé had died. She had only suffered a minor concussion from the blow to her head and was weakened by blood loss. When the police arrived, they found a chaotic scene. Silvana gave a detailed account of the events, but as the sole survivor, she became the prime suspect. The police quickly determined that Silvana had nothing to do with the murder. They located Glenn's car parked on the street across from the house. Inside, they found his untouched lunch of fried chicken and green beans. A database check confirmed that the car belonged to Glenn. Police reviewed surveillance camera footage and accessed Glenn's mobile phone. The case was complicated from the start, taking 3 months for police to identify Bianca as the mastermind behind the attack. She apparently believed she would escape, so she was shocked when the police arrived at her home. Bianca Edmunds was arrested in December 2016 and taken to the police station for questioning, where she became hysterical. She acted as if Glenn was making things up and tried to convince him that he had not made a terrible mistake. However, he ignored her warnings and went ahead with his plan while she was away. Bianca claimed that her boyfriend was furious with Michael's behavior and that he was going to take their son away. According to Bianca, Glenn wanted to spend more time with the child. Although Glenn was not the boy's biological father, he had long wanted a child. The police knew this was a lie. Evidence from Glenn's phone confirmed their suspicions. The phone contained saved text messages and recorded calls detailing the planned crime. The police uncovered a wealth of information about the murder plot that had been in the works for months. In her defense, Bianca presented the last text message Glenn had sent her, in which he expressed his love for her and his hatred for Michael. She claimed that this text message made her aware of the impending attack, which she felt powerless to prevent. However, the police quickly noticed a major problem with the notes Glenn had written about the murder plan. They were full of spelling errors. In contrast, the text message Bianca received was perfectly written too perfectly, and it resembled her own writing style. This led the police to suspect that she had sent the text messages from Glenn's phone to create a false narrative. Bianca denied any involvement in the crime and claimed she knew nothing about it. Despite the strong case against Bianca, the police did not have enough evidence to charge her at the time. She dismissed the charges and denied any involvement in the murder. As a result, she was released, and the investigation continued. During this time, Bianca became bored and returned to Tinder in search of new dates. Just 3 weeks after Glenn's death, she met a man who had just been released from prison on parole. He had a history of violent crime, including the murder of his first wife by slitting her throat in front of their 6-year-old son. Early in their relationship, Bianca informed him that her third husband, Glenn, had died of cancer just weeks after they were to marry. Bianca was pregnant but unfortunately lost the baby in an accident. Her new boyfriend later discovered Glenn and Michael online. He confronted her about the incident, and she revealed that she had planned the murder but insisted that Glenn should not die. She explained that she was too scared to share this with him when they first met, worried that he would not want to continue their relationship. Bianca also admitted to sending text messages from her husband's phone to mislead the investigation. She expressed deep regret for Glenn's death, explaining that she only intended to get rid of Michael. Her motive was fear that he might gain custody of their son. Following Bianca's confession, she became panicked and expressed fear of being caught by the police. Her boyfriend reported her statements to the police. In April 2018, Bianca was questioned again. Despite her boyfriend's testimony, she continued to deny sending the text messages, claiming that she had never seen any maps of Michael's house and denying any involvement in any plans to kill her ex-husband. The police informed her that her fingerprints had been found on the handgun used in the shooting. She was initially unable to respond to this information but continued to deny that custody issues were a motive for the crime. When the police recounted her boyfriend's account, she admitted that she could not remember the conversation. During this time, Bianca suffered from depression after the loss of her child, which she attributed to her mental health and the effects of her antidepressants. Unfortunately, the police determined that they did not have enough evidence to arrest her and were forced to release her. This situation continued until June 2019. Meanwhile, the police had gathered enough evidence to prove that she had either incited or directly participated in the murder of her ex-husband, Michael. The case was delayed, and it was not until June 2022 that hearings began regarding her involvement in Michael's murder. The prosecutor's office believes that Bianca's main motive was her desire to avoid sharing custody of her child and her fear that the father might take the child away. The police discovered that Bianca had planned to imprison her third husband, Glenn, to remove him from her life, as she found him too old and was bored with him. However, the attack did not go as planned, resulting in the deaths of both Michael and Glenn. The prosecution argued that Bianca had written a text message pretending to be Glenn to create an alibi. They also revealed that the outing with Glenn's mother was part of the plan for the crime. To convince the jury, they thoroughly analyzed all the recordings of conversations and text messages. All available evidence was presented, including a map that Bianca was said to have drawn. Bianca's DNA and fingerprints were found on the murder weapon, which clearly indicated that she had lied. Her attorney claimed that this was only circumstantial evidence. It was believed that Glenn disliked Michael because of his relationship with her son. However, several witnesses testified for the prosecution, claiming that Bianca had long wanted to get rid of Michael, her ex-husband, due to a custody dispute. Even Bianca's mother testified in court that the day after the murder, her daughter called to confess that Glenn should not have died and that it was her fault. Bianca claimed that the fingerprints found on the murder weapon were the result of an intimate encounter between her and Glenn. She stated that he was aroused when she pointed the gun at him, but this explanation seemed implausible and did not account for her dishonesty during the interrogations. A few weeks after she began contacting her new boyfriend, Bianca discovered that she was pregnant again. He offered to recant his statement to the police if she forgave him and returned to him, but Bianca believed that the real father of the child was someone else. The jury deliberated on the complicated case but could not reach a unanimous verdict, leading to the cancellation of the original hearings. A retrial began in August, but it was also found to be flawed due to arguments that violated court rules. In December 2022, the case returned to court, this time with all the evidence gathered during the investigation presented. The prosecution presented strong evidence, including text messages exchanged between Bianca and Glenn. In these messages, Bianca mentioned celebrating a special day, although she had no legitimate reason for the occasion. This implied a connection to the murder. Ultimately, the jury concluded that Bianca was the cunning mastermind behind this terrible crime. 2 lives were lost, one of which was cruelly deceived. People were horrified by the level of manipulation Glenn faced before his death. Bianca recognized his weakness and exploited it to her own advantage, trying to achieve multiple goals at once. However, Glenn's death was not part of her plan. She mistakenly believed she could convince her husband to admit his guilt and escape the consequences. Bianca Edmunds was sentenced to 26 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 20 years. Her children were placed in foster care with relatives, leaving them without parental care.